Welcome to TCP, episode of 183, the show where you wish you were here for the 1 hour and a half podcast we had before this podcast. But you'll never know what happened in that podcast now, as we're here to talk about the upcoming Summer Showdown, the tournament, the top four. We have our teams. We got a good look at both of the regions, both the knockouts there. Excellent games across the board. Almost all 5 mappers as well, which I think is a new thing. Like, that's pretty wild. That almost has never happened, but it's been a week of, I think, exciting developments in the meta. I like where things are going, and I like where the competition is headed.
Yeah, we have been spoiled with some of the most close games. Map picks feel the most impactful than they have in a long time. Yeah. Obviously, that probably isn't the case from a team level, but from the viewership standpoint, trading games back and forth, definitely puts a lot of emphasis on these map picks. So yeah, we were spoiled. We were spoiled. Lovely set of games.
Is that an underappreciated point that is not talked about enough? Where, like, when a team missteps in their map pick and whatnot? Because, like, in other esports, we have, like, pretty extensive map pick talks or draft stuff. Doesn't seem to have arrived really in Overwatch much, right?
No, because we never really get to settle in.
Only in tournaments.
Sure.
Regular season, we don't get this.
Yeah, we don't normally have it.
That's actually why you only get the really good games in knockouts. Not just because the better teams are playing, but because with map picks, teams can counter pick, and you end up going to map 5 more often because you have teams picking, based on what they're good at, and you have multiple map 5s, and if you actually look at how the map 5s broke down, it's commonly like, in a pinstripe sort of pattern where one team's win one and then the next one wins the other, the back and forth and back and forth. Sometimes it'll be 2 in a row, but with the way map picks go, even if you do lose one of your map picks, you go to your next map pick, you probably win that one, and suddenly you're good to go. So at the end of the day, map picks do give you the highest quality games. That's like an interesting topic I didn't even think about. I just remembered now. I'm like, hang on, that's actually how it works.
That is an interesting format discussion, but I genuinely do wonder, everybody, I'll break the fourth wall. Everybody in podcast and or YouTube land. This isn't some sort of, algorithmic call to action, even though please click the ads, like and subscribe, 5 stars, all that good stuff. If you have opinions on that, please reach out, because I don't, either in Discord, comment section, whatever. Would that change your appreciation of the league if the format changed? Not to say that it correlates to any kind of like results, which it could, but would that change your enjoyment of the league if map picks were regular season wide as well? I don't think people would have. Do you think it would?
I don't
just
think
inherently
would disagree. I think part of the reason why map picks, we're getting into this topic now, apparently. The real reason, well, I don't know the real reason. I think speculatively the reason why regular season has preset maps is to widen the variety of games. Because what you'll find is you release a map pool, and teams will end up just picking the same maps over and over and over, because maybe there's one globally hated map.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
No one wants to touch this map.
And
so in terms of variety and the viewing experience, if you're a viewer watching, you end up just seeing the same maps over and over and over, because those are the maps that the teams like playing.
Yeah.
And so the regular season map sets with the locked in maps, that enforces variety, because it means your viewing experiences are that you are seeing different maps because they're enforced.
I think
can they just be stage by stage though?
Huh?
I think it's mostly that teams would just cry if they had to prepare every map every week, right? Like,
well, it also, that's the other thing. It does give you a little bit more stability and preparation, because you know what maps you're going to have to play. So that actually helps teams a little bit. So you're not wrong.
Also, if I am kidnapped by the rank queue every time and forces me into like a random map, which I always tend to hate other than King's Row, I might as well see that in my esports games, right? Like, it's only fair.
I think we had a good middle point. You get to see both. You get the good variety in the regular season, then the ultra competitive games with the map picks in the knockouts and etc. So I think we've reached a decent middle ground. If we even need one, I guess we do, because there's good arguments for both.
For sure.
But yeah, not a deep topic. I think it's not a deep topic. I think like both have their merits. and you want the close good games later, and you can have some more meme stuff earlier with whatever maps.
That's not a bad format.
And in some ways, it's not like the matches are lesser quality, because if both teams know what to prepare for, ideally they should be more prepped than they would be for, the knockouts. You could actually argue your counterpoint could be that while map picks make the game more coin flippy, because that's why it just goes A team wins, B team, A team, B team, and then A team wins the last map, or some BS like that, because it's just coin flip, because people just pick maps they're good at. That's a bit of a rabbit hole though, as really what this is just to talk about the fact that we had some good 5-map series in our knockouts that we'll be covering in terms of how we got to our top 4 teams this episode. Some good previews in terms of what our expectations are for the actual Summer Showdown tournament matches coming up very soon, and how we think, how stuff's going to go, what we're looking forward to. But before we get any further, guys, episode 183, brought to you by our lovely patrons. As always, you guys are the best. Battle Cram, Bo P, Bronzebot Boohal, Chare, Chris R34444, Fable Steven, Hunter Tane, Casher67, Lolshin, Rexane, Sir Girthalot, Wilma D, Yiska's All Percentage Shower Gel, and Your Misery. Thank you guys so much. Let's get into the recap area first. So we had our knockout games. So in the past weekend, we had a ton of games. This last week of regular season play is always the most intense, every single tournament cycle. Let's get into the Western region first, as we usually do. So we started things out with a lot of 3-0s. We had Atlanta, London 3-0, Boston over Houston 3-0, which is probably one I want to get into. Washington, London 3-0. Gladiators, Toronto 3-0. Atlanta, Boston 3-0. So that's a 6-0 finish for the Atlanta Reign. Dallas beating Toronto 3-1. So that was the first non-3-0 game, at least in the Western region. And then the 5-map banger of Washington Gladiators, which had huge implications on Shock potentially still making it into the knockouts. And I believe either Washington or Gladiators needed to get a 3-0 here for Shock to sneak through in the 6th seed. But because they both took maps off each other, Shock's chances were dashed. And then you finish off the Western region with Dallas getting a 3-0 versus Houston. So Houston ends up 0-6 in their second week.
Yeah, that's devastating. I also tracked like a little bit of a development in terms of how the scores develop. And I mean, it's not that surprising that pattern is there. But generally speaking, you see more 3-0s the further you are into a tournament cycle. Meaning, in the first
as teams
week,
get better
and more refined, right? Like, in the first week, you will generally have less 3-0s than you will have in the third week. Because, presumably, like there's an advantage for worse teams to get maps off or upset better teams. As Pre already pointed out, like
I was just gonna say, I think Pre said that, but
right,
that is something I do agree with.
That was something about like upsets generally, but it's also like that very same trend that we assume to be part of like meta uncertainty also sees itself in the amount of 3-0s. Now, I think generally speaking, the wider player base or viewer base would probably like that, to have less 3-0s and more upset potential and whatnot. So I guess in that department, like Hero Pools delivers.
Do they? Because you think you get more clown fiestas. Like, no one likes to see just train wreck games where both teams are confused.
Fair.
So you do and you don't.
I think people do want to see clown fiestas. I think
so
that's
people would rather see. Yeah, no, you can't use a toilet bowl because that's a specific meme. When you have the absolute 2 worst teams playing each other in a toilet bowl, there is an inherent novelty there. But remove that from the conversation. Look at 2 middle of the pack. If you get 2 middle of the pack teams playing in a 5-map series where both teams are just confused, I don't think that's a good viewing experience. And you don't have the toilet bowl novelty to carry it through either.
I would tend to agree, but I genuinely wonder what people would say. I think people like close games regardless of if it's good or bad. I think they just like parity.
Yeah, very possible. It's
also a lot of people probably don't know what's good and bad. They just see lights flashing up and Symmetra walls.
It's close. There's a story. Which team wins? It's not clear. Dude, it's exciting. It's dramatic.
The thing is, I think there's entertainment value beyond like what kind of feedback you will immediately get by watching like a terrible match. which is just like, like for the same reason you can't look away from the car crash,
Yeah, it's a Michael Bay movie.
right? Like it's just
But
I think there's
that's
genuine value, especially like also in the contrast to the other games where maybe
That's the
you're
toilet
watching a
bowl.
good one.
the
Yeah.
toilet bowl is the train wreck that you can't turn away from because it's so entertaining. You know, watching the toilet bowl between the two worst teams is like watching any episode of the Kardashians. It's or that's maybe not a good example because I absolutely do turn away from that. That's a level of train wreck I'm not even gonna lay my eyes on.
Right. Or
And my
Survivor.
virgin eyes can't handle that.
It's a season of Survivor.
Pretty much.
But I don't know. Yeah, I had this interesting discussion as well. And I spoke to Kilios about this, some other people, but
Okay.
as even though we're not going to get into APAC talk just yet, so we're going to keep this dialed down until we get
Mm.
there. But I have thoroughly enjoyed the Shanghai 3-0s because despite them being stomps, seeing a team play so well, so coordinated, so well oiled is
Yep.
entertaining and thoroughly rewarding, even though it's a complete 3-0 stomp.
Yes, that's
So there's
the
like-
difference.
Yeah,
It's
there's
rewarding.
like another way you look at it, and it's just like I don't know that looking at a low value 3-2 is better than a high value 3-0.
Depends on what you're looking for when you watch the Overwatch League. Are you looking to be rewarded with good play and like diving into that, or are you trying to be entertained?
Well, if you're a fan of the team that's getting 0-3, you probably hate it.
True.
But I think even those people should. I don't know. This is a big should.
Mhm.
Objectively look at it and say like, yeah, but the other team they were so good. Like, oh my god, you got to be impressed by how good the other team was. Objectively, I'd like to imagine people could be like that, but
I think
a
some
lot of
are.
fans
Some
probably would
are.
be too upset to get there, and that's then that's fine. It's nothing against that. It's just you naturally you wouldn't be too happy with your team losing. Maybe for me, maybe I'm looking for something. I'm too cultured to see 3-2 messy games. I guess I'm just I'm out there with my monocle, sipping my tea, looking at 3-0 stomps and admiring the beauty and how good some
Yeah.
of these stomps are.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's like I feel like it's important to have like a good mix of that. Like if everything was always close,
Yes,
you
agreed.
would just dull to the experience as well. I love a good stomp. Like one of my favorite things. Have you ever like looked at a sports like record and then compared it to whatever you're doing? Like it's really hard in Overwatch, it feels like, because yes, you can look at aim and say, okay, you're never going to aim like ants, right? Like this is impressive, whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
The coordinative part probably very often goes past what you can really like compare yourself to, right? But
Sure.
like to see like someone like Houston get like 3-0'd by Dallas is really impressive. Like it's the same thing when I'm basically like when I'm looking at my running times, and then I think that whatever I run over 6 kilometers, Elliot Kipchoge, the guy that has the current marathon world record,
Yeah.
runs twice as fast as I do over 42 kilometers. I'm like, okay, this is impressive. And very much the same is true. Like, I can't know how much better, like, Sparkle realistically is. I don't know the times X, right? But
Mhm.
to see that they once again, like, gate-capped Houston out of, like, going further is, like... And Houston is a good team, right? Like, we now have a
Yeah,
benchmark where Houston is. To once again do it to them is, like, super sweet to go. They're just, like, at least 1.5 x better than Houston is in situations where it matters, right?
Right.
So
In that way,
Before
it's a
you-
little sadistic.
Before we get
just-
into, I do want to get into Houston discussion. Do you
Yeah.
have something extra to add in the sadism department? Because I do
Oh,
want to
no,
hear
no,
about that, Joe.
It
No?
it very
Okay.
much is just the flip side of the coin of like if you appreciate Boston and just Houston failing, like there is a flip side to that where it's just like yeah, like you are rewarded because you see like a good team lose in a convincing way. It's just like
There's something about like, and this is where to add to that as well. There's something. The times where you really want to see a team lose is usually when it's like a really good team that's been too good. So like I think last year and the year before when Shock was so damn good, seeing them
Yeah.
lose at any point was like, oh my god, so exciting. Or it's like when there's a heel in the sport, like you have like a Conor McGregor that just lost. It's like, oh my god, so exciting, kind of deal. That's what draws it in.
did Houston break their ankle? Was that what I'm hearing? Is that the analogy that we're going to? Did Houston just fall on their get their kick checked and just snap their ankle in half?
Not
Right.
sure.
I don't know.
I mean, it's the thing is like, see, I'm the next level of jerk. Like everyone that goes like,
Okay.
oh, I love like seeing the best teams like also fall from grace. Like everyone inherently feels they're an underdog, and so if the guy at the top trembles, oh, it's so nice. I get a great feeling when the lower guy gets absolutely ruffle stomped. That's why I love the Atlanta London game. Not because I hate London, but because I love people that expect upsets to be upset for their absolute pleb mentality of thinking that like enjoying
Which, by the way,
the grades falling is like a personality. Do better. Like that is just like fucking terrible entertainment. Just get out. Like
Yiska is more cultured than you.
yes.
Oh, 100%.
that's what.
What's interesting about what you said is you'll notice that line of that philosophy does not apply to the LA Valiant. You know why? Because no one expects them to upset.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So there's no enjoyment from watching them get beaten up every week. In fact, I find it frustrating to watch their games. And at this point, I've casted at least 6 of their matches, and it doesn't get any better. I think I had more enjoyment casting them earlier on, where it was like getting baited into thinking, oh, maybe they could be okay. Yeah, they took a map off of Chengdu, and they're not they could be reasonable. Maybe they could not be the worst, but yeah, as the weeks go by, nope, they're the worst, and they're certainly just not going to win. And now watching them is like, I don't know, have I moved on from pity? Because at one point it was like, I've gone through the different phases of, oh, maybe they could be okay, to, oh, I just feel bad for them, to now just be like, man, why are they here?
Yeah.
This is just unbelievable. This is just crap now. It's a waste of time, waste of my time, waste of people watching, waste of time for their opponents playing them. It's just a complete waste of time for everybody. And that's even when, honestly, I'm sliding back here, guys. Stop me, hold me back. When I look at stats or stuff like that, and I hate to be a stat Steven about it, but sometimes they are doing okay. It's almost like if it wasn't for the fact that every other team is so much better than them, maybe they could be okay. But just as a team, they're just not on the level, and there's no redeeming factor there, because you don't even have the London storyline where like, oh, maybe London could upset. That doesn't even exist for LA Valiant, so it's just a complete chore watching their games now.
Yep. They don't have breadsticks. They don't have a sparker waiting in the wings to kind of come out and change the season around, even narratively. There's nothing. It started bad, it ended bad.
Like,
yeah, at least for Vancouver, there's breadsticks, even though I think we're all tired of that meme.
Oh, I'm over it, but people eat it up. People want their carbs.
Well, ironically, they're not eating the breadsticks at all, but I mean,
they want to.
They're eating up the meme. There's at least something. I think if Vancouver didn't have the meme going for them, it'd be maybe just as bad as the Valiant.
100%.
So Valiant need a meme. I think we figured it out. They need a meme to get them through. And the Milana and Banana thing wasn't good enough. We need something more ripe than that. Anyway,
yeah, it's just abject.
That's for them to figure
sadness.
Dallas, Houston, or just Houston. Dallas, Houston, or just Houston. We're going to get more into Dallas anyway as we get into the discussion about how they're playing. So maybe more Houston than Dallas for now. As how did they start? They had a very good. I'm pretty sure they had a good opening. Their first 2 matches were
Shock and Titans.
Of which they 3-0 Titans expected, and then a 3-1 Shock, which I think that was the game that baited everyone to believe, like, oh my god, Houston, they're going to be this like elite team. They beat the Shock, and now Shock are kind of screwed, because that actually did screw the Shock a bit, because they lost to Gladiators. They beat London in a 3-2, and that was the game, by the way, that baited all the London fans into believing that they could get an upset win. So there's like a double bait here. But San Francisco baited the London fans, and Houston baited their own fans. As you know, okay, well, Houston, they got the win versus San Francisco, and San Francisco won versus Paris. And now I think if you look back on it, in the reverse mirror, you might look at this as being like, yeah, Houston is better than San Francisco, but San Francisco is also a struggling team. So maybe that wasn't the most telling result, or in fact, it was a quite telling result. It tells you that Houston is better than San Francisco, but San Francisco are probably a 7th place team currently.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that era is done. So I don't want to hear anything like any other opinions on this. Like, I don't care if they literally do the three-peat. Like,
Yeah, no.
that's done and dusted.
So even a literal 3P doesn't save them now.
No, it's like their era is over, and they then legitimately locked into a meta, or like, I don't know. I just can't take that season the same way. Like, it's the same as like, it's probably worse than if Seoul had won last year, right? Like, nobody legitimately believes that Seoul was the second best team in the Overwatch League last season.
Not at all.
Right?
No.
Right?
Throughout the entirety,
Avril?
if you give them that book.
Not even you
Wow,
do,
drinks.
right? Avril? Okay. He's
looking for
Okay,
props,
I mean,
quick.
look, what do you? I don't know why you have to always drag me into these Soul discussions as if like I'm, you know, what do you what?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Soul, they're an alright team. And just by the way, I didn't pred Soul. You predded Soul, not me. That's all.
That's
on
true.
you.
He's the only
I
one who
did not
brought
pred
it.
Soul. So what do you guys want? Like,
Well,
I don't know how this narrative. Okay, I do know how this narrative started because in the preseason I put Soul quite high. I get it. Okay, cool. But you know, as the seasons progressed, I learned, and apparently other people didn't. So
so what's your opinion of Seoul now? Should we delay that?
I'll tell you in about 50 minutes when we get
Okay,
to
all right. Let's go.
For all the people that just want to know my answer now, click the link in the description that takes
gets
you
you to
straight
Seoul.
to the Soul discussion.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So essentially what I'm saying is I think there were some early results
Mhm.
where, you know, and this is maybe a thing about only having 4 matches at a stage as well, but then one of them is versus Vancouver, which is always going to be a free win. So really, I think the whole Houston thing came off the 3-1 versus San Francisco. Then you get to their next week, and the real kicker was that initial 0-3 versus Boston. Like, whoa, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
That shouldn't have happened. I
Yeah,
think
that
everyone
shouldn't
would have
have.
walked into everyone except the most diehard Boston fans would have expected Houston to win that
Yes.
win that match.
Yes. Because you couldn't expect what they pulled out. Like, they returned to this comfort style that, you know, Yiska has been kind of tying together throughout the season. This idea that, you know, teams are trending to be and are accepting of their own individual styles rather than trying to conform to a meta. I know that sounds very hippie, but it is true, and it was very
I
much
like that,
evident in
though.
this match. Like, Boston utilized Valentine's hero pool, utilized, you know, their edge case dive composition to really just force Houston to either adapt to it, which they couldn't figure out, or mirror it, which they don't have the pieces to match them at every role, let's say. I think the big one was the synergy between Tracer, which would have been Happy at the time, and their main tank. Whatever that being, Ball or what have you. I think Happy just kind of looked out of sorts comparatively, and you wanted Dante on the Tracer, but you also want Dante on the other picks, whether it be Echo or Sombra or what have you. You can't have 2 Dantes.
This is the first time I think people look at Houston and be like, "Man, Happy's the problem." I don't know. Okay, maybe that's not
Yeah.
accurate. That's not a fair statement. Happy, I don't know that he's a problem, but this is the
No.
first time where you'd rather be like, "Man, I wish Dante was playing Happy's hero," which I
Mhm.
think in main melee no one would have ever said.
Nope.
Yeah.
It has always been, for the most part, it's always been the reverse, where, you know, Happy has like his, and it's not even just like Happy's bad. That's definitely not the takeaway I want people to take from this. It's that Houston lacks a little bit of depth, and I don't think they were necessarily super prepared. I think they were prepared to kind of play this, you know, rush down mirror. They come out with the double shield. If somebody was going to throw them like a wrecking ball look, I think they wanted to play the Torb, and that was not what's, you know, Boston threw them. Boston threw them something a little bit more, I think, akin to Dallas, where it's like the 6-man all-in dive. It's not exactly 6-man, but it kind of feels that way. They have like very telegraphed win conditions with the
Also
Genji
played
blade.
Genji.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas does as well later on, but we'll get to them. It was not something they were prepped for, so it's a little lack of depth. It's a little underprepared, just because, again, Boston kind of threw. I think Boston this stage for the Summer Showdown has been a team that has been throwing some very weird looks and being very early to meta trends, which I'm excited to kind of follow through the rest of the season with. Hopefully they can maintain that, but hero pools obviously is a little hard. But yeah, Houston, there's a lot of things that went wrong for them. I don't think anybody was kind of prepping them versus Dallas. I don't know how you guys felt about that, but I felt like that was kind of expected. Maybe giving them a map, but
Well, I gave Dallas the pred,
Yep.
but I think I bought. I don't know. I drank the Kool-Aid. I drank the Houston Kool-Aid. For one game. Shame on me. I know. Say it. We'll get that out of the way. Shame on me. I got baited by the 3-1 versus San Francisco, just like all their fans did. And then punished straight away from that 0-3 versus Boston. But even with the Kool-Aid, I still locked in Dallas because my gut feeling was that Dallas was going to be the better team, and then they were frankly the much better team. I am maybe a little bit surprised that Houston didn't run as much Sombra-based compositions
yeah.
when you have Dante on the team. Now,
Mhm.
my theory for that, and I speculate that part of the reason for this is I don't think they have a capable enough tracer to match Dante.
No.
Because Dante needs to be your tracer player, but he is also your Sombra player,
Yeah.
and he's also your Echo player, and he's
Yep.
also your XYZ
Your May player.
keep going.
Yeah, yeah.
And
He's
you're
also
he's your flex.
just keep listing the heroes. He's all of these players.
Yep.
And I think this team, I don't think embarrassment or riches is the right way to say it. Let's just say at one point they had 5 DPSs, but it still feels like you want to copy Dante and clone him.
Yes.
So you have 5 DPSs, but you still feel like you don't have enough DPSs. Does that make sense? That's like a weird place to be.
Do you know
It's
who
also
you
the
should be
meta,
there.
right? Like I think
Yes,
there's
the meta
other
hurt
teams,
them.
like other teams could easily fall into that same situation if other meta compositions with DPS combinations were the case, right? Like it's
Well, it should have been Dallas, but somehow they got over it. But they're special. They're the exception to the rule.
Yes. But I think that happens to other teams as well. Unless you have like super flexible, like unless you're like Shanghai, who have like 2 Swiss Army knives in every position, basically.
Sure.
But,
It felt like, not to completely cut you off, but it felt like there was a fork in the road meta-wise. Like in the meta game, there was like very clearly 2 separate ways you could go. And it didn't feel like Houston played into the avenue or the sub-avenue that really kind of suited them. I think if they were to run or to have committed a lot of practice towards the May Rhine rush, I think that would have suited them. I think you can move Happy onto McCree if you play any kind of like dive matchups. And if you play the mirror, then you're okay with the mirror because you have Dante. Like maybe Happy Sim isn't all that bad or all that good, but I find that hard to believe. Yeah, I think there was like a embedded fork.
Can I be honest? Ironically, you say fork when we look at when we talk about like a fork in the road, it usually pertains to like 2 paths, right?
Yeah.
I think there were 3 paths. Which the irony there is like in a fork on the table, there's 3 of the fucking
Sure,
plugs.
yeah.
What I'm trying to get to is I think there was a 3rd composition that Houston were banking on that ended up being the bait composition that they took.
Yes.
And you can't blame them for it because no one knows.
No,
You don't know
course
until you start losing with it.
right.
Agreed.
And that was a double shield. And so what we ended up with in this meta, it was either Ball Sombra Dive,
Yep.
Sim May TP Brawl,
Yep.
or double shield. And Houston were like, we're going double shield.
Mm.
And that ended up being the one, in my opinion, and maybe people might debate me on this. That ended up to me being the composition that was the weakest of the 3. So Houston, perhaps unlucky. Maybe they felt like that was where their strength was based on hero pulls.
Sure.
And maybe it was too late to pivot. But I think if they had a capable enough tracer alongside Dante, they could have played potentially the ball Sombra Dive. I don't know if Jungle or Dreamer have a good enough ball, but I think a lot of NA teams kind of lack the ball supremacy that
Agreed.
APAC has. But maybe you're right, Joe. Maybe they could have gone towards Make Sim TP Brawl instead, but it seemed like that was even perhaps a bridge too far.
I would love, and this is probably not feasible at the moment. We're more than halfway through the season. I would love to see Houston make a play for Tayo. I genuinely think
What?
for Tayo for making
right,
a buyout agreement from the Shock. Somebody who doesn't see a ton of use, probably wants to see some play time. Obviously, is moving to another good team. I think Houston making a play for Tayo, either now or in the postseason, makes a lot of sense. especially from the argument that he
play
brings
what
that
is he playing?
tracer. He brings, I think, the thought process for him on the shock in general when he was first brought in last year was that he was going to give them at least a little bit more flexibility at projectile, and I do think he can play that. I think that he builds out the Houston DPS. It gives them a little bit more depth so that if you run into these instances where you want to play like the Tracer Sombra, you can. You can put Dante on Sombra. You can put Tayo on Tracer. If you need a Tracer player to be able to play the Ashe, to be able to play some hit scan, Tayo can do that as long, maybe a little bit better than Happy if it's not necessarily a dedicated mid to long range meta, right? Where it like McCree is a lock and you don't really move off of him, or Ashe is a lock and you don't move off of her.
You probably have the most faith in Tyre than anybody out there
Yeah,
right
I
now
don't
because I
know.
don't even know I don't even know what Tyre plays anymore. I don't know what his hero pool is legitimately.
Agreed. I think he's outside of the realm of players that people really want to see, but I think he deserves a chance. I think he kind of is another Aspire type character that really never got a shot, that fits well within Houston, or ideally, strategically speaking, could fit well within Houston, and I think would do both parties some good.
Why not just go the Aspire route then?
You could do that too.
Like
100%, you could.
Like this guy is about to be off his second extension,
Sure.
right? Like with the
Yep.
break week, I think that lines up. Like if you just offer him a better contract than whatever Toronto's able to do, why not? He can play remotely, right? Theoretically,
could do.
Yeah, I think
totally.
that's not only a more proven, but like I don't know, feels just safer and more in the profile of Houston to have someone like Aspire and then Tayo. I don't know. Like that's such a big gamble. I'm not even sure like if the Tracer is at all up to snuff. I'm not sure if it's actually better than what Happy could be bringing to the table.
Can I?
Yeah.
My honest approach to this is that I think Houston should have looked internally instead of we're speaking hypothetically here. They obviously haven't looked at it. We don't know, but clearly they haven't looked at another player to put onto the roster. At least we assume. But I think the internal look is important here, where you look at the other Texan team. I mean, damn, they wrote the blueprint on this, where it's just like, hey, they are a team that lack a lot of hero pools. I mean, they are one of the most homogenous teams in the league. People, by the way, stupidly have combated me on this. I'm like, go and look at their comps, and don't tell me that Sparkle going Doom and Genji every now and then makes them flexible.
We'll get to it.
It doesn't. They play the same comp. This is not necessarily criticism. It's just me being factual.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of deluded people out there that don't realize that Dallas play like one comp.
Yep.
But my point there is, it means saying that it's not not necessarily a bad thing, is that Houston could have looked at that and be like, hey, we lack some things as well, and we can take the Dallas Fuel approach and just play to our strengths, which is maybe what they were doing with the double shield thing. Like, I can commend that, and they may be saying, well, if we are looking internally and we're saying what are our strengths, perhaps double shield's the answer. And it didn't work out for them this meta.
Sure.
But if they had gone towards the whole Sim Mei thing, Happy on Sim Dante May, which they did play, by the way, and they go harder into the Django Rhine where he did reasonable on that and May Melee, we're back into a Rhine meta. I would have expected that Houston on a Rhine meta should be far better, and at the start it did look like that versus San Francisco, but they just couldn't carry that through the finish line. I don't know.
I think if I had to guess, and again this is speculation on my behalf, I think the double shield, the Torb, some mid to long range hit scans, I think those are looks that to me signify like this trend in NA, at least with maybe the teams that Houston was scrimming, that there was like a dive bubble that was kind of colliding with them, and their answer to it in a reactionary way was this double shield, and I think they found a lot of success with it, and I think they felt like it was safe rather than something that they were super ready to weaponize and just kind of run people over with. I got the sense, especially early on in this season, that Houston was going to be the team that really kind of I remember their Hanzo look in the melee.
Right.
There's some other picks out there. I think inserting of Jake was kind of interesting on certain picks. Maybe that could have been utilized a little bit more, but even then it's tough because obviously he's juggling coaching and playing, and that can't be easy. But yeah, I do have to bring, I do draw my eyes to their depth, at least right now. I don't know
Yeah.
if the next hero pool is going to leverage that as much, but I think the moral of the story here is that there was a little bit of a lack of depth for Houston. Not a bad team, but just the reason why they got kind of clapped later on.
We'll move on from Houston because we've been here for a while now, and but
One more
I think
thing.
it's go on.
Like, I think a big talking point also needs to be Juby's brigade, because like I think a lot of opponents were surprised that they were running breadcrumbs with Juby in and not Jake. And just statistically speaking, that seems like a mistake. And I think that could be a play that either speaks to flexibility, like maybe you need or you bank on having to play the Lucio as well, or you want to give the guy some playtime, which pays off for you later in the season.
Can I be real? I think you shouldn't swap the Lucio Brig role into two people. Some teams are doing that, and the obvious one people got to bring up like, oh, skewed Brig.
Yeah.
What about Moth and Skewed? But I'm like, but I don't think that's good. I think you want one player in the support role to cover both those heroes.
Right.
Like, you don't see okay, maybe this is the worst example, but you want like a Lee J God. Oh, just get Lee J God for him. No, I'm not saying that, but like ideally you want one player that is just excellent on both. And I even think Philly swapping time between Toby and Astro is maybe a mistake there as well. I don't know. There's another point to that, and if you I've heard that maybe the team has a better look leadership-wise with Jaken. I don't know if this is like a confirmed thing or if anyone else wants to speak to this, or if anyone else has looked further into this, because I haven't looked further into this. But Houston with Jaken, from a leadership perspective, cleaner than Houston without Jaken.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's with a lot of teams. I think you aptly mark Glads as a similar team. I think both teams lack that leadership, lack that cohesive, shot calling, comp switching, positioning. I think even to the Glad's perspective, being a little too aggressive sometimes with Skewed, kind of just all-inning with their supports, whereas somebody like Moth maybe is a little bit more measured. Maybe the inverse for Houston, where they don't have that adaptability, that kind of pilot at the head of the the mech that is able to survey the battlefield. It is an intangible. It is kind of a narrative, but I do think there is something to that role that you need within a team perpetually. You can't just remove that.
By the way,
where did I hear it from? You go, Yiska. I'm trying to remember where I heard that entire thing from. Anyway,
none of the maps that Gladiators won in the knockouts were with Moth. Now,
with Moth, yes.
That doesn't mean that Moth is a bad player or anything. That probably just means like either the reintegration doesn't work that well, or they're just playing worse with Lucio comps, right? That's very likely to be the case. But it speaks towards like there being a stark departure where you have to ask, like, is the specialist actually working out, right? Like, what are you losing in the process of swapping someone out in that position, right? And I sadly forgot to ask this because I was trying to, or was meant to, in the post-match with Moth. But I'm interested if these people that have these niche positions, like let's say Juby, in Juby's case it's pretty obvious, but like is Jake, for instance, currently learning Lucio as well? Or is Moth also still learning Brigitte? Or is Scoot learning Lucio, right? Like, is it not the goal to make one of the starters obsolete? That seems way more workable to me, especially in these high flex positions. So, like the same, like otherwise you will run into these incompatibility issues where, in a meta as fluid as we are playing them at the moment, you will like on a map by map basis. That's not even the big problem, but like in inner map issues where you're meant to switch styles. Either if it's between defense or offense, or like between map locations, you cannot do so effectively, right?
Yep.
Without losing a bunch of power towards your execution. And yes, there's something to be said. Like I think one of the biggest problems that Outlaws has is that they are too defined and too limited in a lot of these situations. Like, you want Django probably like, it's hard to say, but the Django Dreamer situation doesn't seem clean to me.
Yeah.
Then you want Piggy on Sigma. He's definitely
I
stepped
think
down
Dreamer's benched now.
and on everything else, right? Like, then Sigma. Then you have the Dante situation where you want him to play everything. You want Happy to be only in for his snipers predominantly, or the hard hit scans at least. Then you want like Jake in only for Brig, and like the only one that can play everything seems to be Crimzo and Dante. And it's like, is that enough for your staple? While in Dallas, they have like 3 players that played the entire season in terms of hours. Like Doa, Fearless, and Fielder.
Hamid?
Fielder, I'm pretty sure. Hanbin? Oh yeah, it might be Hanbin. Might be 4 people actually.
What? They don't have
it
another
would have to be
flex tank,
more.
so it has to be Hanbin.
Yeah.
it'd have to be 100.
Yeah. So like that's a different makeup, and that speaks also towards like smaller rosters maybe, even though like you can have bigger rosters, just don't play the rest much, right?
Well, they're forced to. They're forced to in the way where the only sub they have is Field or Repel, and Repel hasn't played for such a long time now.
Yeah.
It's likely he won't
Yeah, he probably.
foreseeably because Field is doing such a great job.
Yeah.
That why would you have Repel back in? Unless well, actually you would if you played double flex support, but we currently don't have one of those metas. Who knows? Maybe Countdown Cup bans could get
Could
that
be.
one in there, depending. But
Playoff patch?
we don't know. We don't know. It's all speculative right now. I think teams, in my opinion, and again, this is not a good example because I'm about to talk about Dallas and Shanghai, and you know people are going to come at me with, "Oh, just be Dallas and Shanghai for him." But what I'm really trying to get to is those are the teams. Like what is consistent here between those teams is they have a clear starting lineup, especially in Shanghai's case, where they actually have a big bench, a big enough bench. They don't have a huge bench, but they got 2 extra DPSs and another flex support for a double flex support meta. So the only thing Shanghai really have over Dallas is the 2 extra DPSs, and Dallas still have Pine on the way. So what I'm trying to get to is they have a clear starting lineup that is good enough to just play what they need in any meta, or at least in what they perceive to be the meta and what they need to be good at, or especially in the case of Shanghai, even shifting during a tournament in June Joust was crazy. So you don't have this weird situation where like, oh, Lee Jae-gon plays Brig and now this guy comes in. Well, you don't have a weird situation where like, oh, Iziaki only plays Zen and now Molly comes to play Anna. Like that just doesn't happen. And I think that's a good, now you are building synergy with a specific team. You have building better coordination. You're building better standards in terms of, you know, what is this team doing with its starting lineup rather than not quite playing musical chairs. It's not a fair statement, but you know, we're heading towards that territory if you have too many quote unquote specialists on the team. I think the only role where you really want to have a specialist is probably DPS because the DPS pools are so large that you almost have to. But beyond that, like tanks and supports, you should just have one tank and one support in each role that just plays what you need to play in that position, in my opinion.
And if you have a depth issue, and this is going to sound really dumb, but I think you have to kind of impose your own stylistic will in a way to kind of meet your tanks and supports where they are, rather than trying to force your core of 4. Shout out to the real ones who get the Yiska reference. That need to be the core, that have to be the pillars that make up that style. I think that's where Overwatch is headed, and it's only going to continue into the Countdown Cup, into the playoff patch, and into the future. Like, you need a stable foundation to work from.
All right, now we're gonna we kind of talked about Glads already. Well, we kind of started talking about Glads. We're gonna do that properly now. We're talking about the whole moth skewed thing. One area that I do enjoy from Glads outside of the moth skewed thing is I actually think the way they're rotating the DPSs makes a lot of sense, and their DPSs, for the most part, are very flexible, especially when you look at Kev's Mirror. Like, damn, that's a good duo. But then even, you know, what Birdring brings to the table is great as well. You're seeing a lot more Mirror this stage, and I think a lot of that is due to the fact that Mirror's got the type of hero pool where he does the Echo as well.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, he's your best Doom. And he's got a lot of the flex pick, the same flex picks that Kevster has, but it complements Kevster. I think I said this on a previous episode of TCP,
I think so.
that the Kevster Mirror duo is very similar to the Dolha Sparkle duo because they're both flex DPS players that have complementary hero pools, and that is like a nice way of saying they have overlapping hero pools as well. What I'm saying is like you can be very flexible in terms of who plays what because they both play very similar things. And then you have a kind of Doom-ish, like a light Doom meta. And I say light Doom meta because only the teams that believe they have an elite tier Doom are actually playing the Doom. It's not like a real Doom meta, because a real Doom meta, everyone would be playing it,
Everybody.
no matter
Yeah.
what. But here it's just like, no, we have a mechanical god on Doom, we're going to do it because we can, or because we believe it's good enough. So you have Sparkle and Mirror primarily rolling out the Dooms, and the other reason why you have a light Doom meta is because we have a Sim meta, and a Symmetra meta is always going to bring out the Doom. You know, it's just the law of nature, you know, the law of ecology, where you have an over population of Symmetra, so the Doomfist population is going to be there to meet them and prey on the Symmetras, as is the law of the jungle.
Or work with them. Repositioning without having to burn any kind of your abilities.
With them to kill the other Sim.
Exactly. Yeah.
Quickly. Yeah.
100%. They enable each other in weird ways.
And Muse, as well as bringing a lot of different looks on the tanks, as you should be. You don't have like a ball specialist on the team, and Gladiators have a lot of different looks. And I actually think, you know, we'll transition to this to some Justice conversation as well. But I think Glads and Justice have very similar teams in a way where they're both able to change between these different comps. They don't feel like they're tied down necessarily. Like we must play Brawl, or we must be a double shield team, or we must be a dive team. Glads and Washington, to me, are both very flexible, and Glads especially have shown me a lot of different looks over the stage. In terms of, especially later on, in terms of how flexible they can be, and that entire Washington Glads matchup was a bit of a battle of flexibility as well, because both teams ran a lot of different looks. I think the real thing about Glads that really shook things earlier on was that 3-2 reverse sweep versus Paris that we covered last week, and they had to do a bit of a bounce back this week. They still finished 2-2, and then they snuck through with a bit of tiebreaker versus San Francisco, a team that they beat. So Shock were kind of screwed in that matter because Glads already beat them. So Glads were probably good no matter what, but they do squeeze through on a succeed. And when I say squeeze through, I mean squeeze into the knockouts. Obviously, they didn't make it further than that, but I'm not disappointed with what I saw at Glads. And there's this whole Reddit narrative of like, anytime Glads lose, everyone calls for DP to be fired. I'm like, guys, this is so extreme and hyperbolic. Can you not accept that maybe Glads actually played a phenomenal game, and Atlanta were just the better team? Atlanta were a phenomenal team as well.
Yep.
Either team could have gone to Hawaii.
Yes.
Either team could have gone. And it just so happens to be Atlanta. I don't think you have to... I think if you look at this in a vacuum, be like, oh, if Glads lose, then the flowchart says fire DP. You just got to do that, right? That's not how it works, in my opinion. You have to actually look at this game and look at how good Glads were.
That's kind of where we're at with like coaching, and it's a fun topic to kind of get into outside of this podcast. I will put a pin in when it comes to like coaches of the year or coaching staff of the year, if you want to kind of change the title of it. I think we can at this point throughout DP's career say that he is probably one of the most creative coaches that Overwatch has. He's always not necessarily meta defining, but finds interesting ways to operate in a meta, whether that's bizarre ways on how to use your SimTP, not in a bad way, just, you know, interesting ways that I don't see a ton of people use. Utilizing mirror in the best way that he can with the SimTP, trying different kind of flank shatter methods, whether it's sending everybody through or just sending, you know, Muse through. I think for Glad specifically, they're really close, genuinely really close to being a extremely good team. And to kind of circle back to the support discussion, I do think that if they had Moth in full time, and I get that it's probably too late now. I think there's probably a lot of like sunken cost with how much time they split with Moth and Skewed practice wise leading up to this point. It's probably hard to argue, but if they started with Moth kind of operating in this runner-esque position where he can kind of be that like vocal figure within the team that can kind of keep everybody's, you know, level-headed. Yeah, I do believe that Glads could be the team that goes to Hawaii. I think it's just little things at like the top of that stack where you're stacking up all the different kind of books and knickknacks and all these little things. It's just the stuff at the top that's just slightly askew. They're really close, and I like what I'm seeing from them. For the most part, it's just like little positional things or little mistimings or bird ring missing this hack or getting caught out or running through the TP. It's not him specifically, but just using him as an example. It's the most it's a game of inches right now for them.
You know what the answer is? The top level of NA, like between like the top 3, top 4, maybe, is actually pretty stacked.
It's tight. Yeah, it's tight.
And so it's like, yeah, okay, 2 of those teams are just not going to make it. I'm sorry. And unfortunately, Dallas has just not made it because Atlanta were on their game on that last map and on several other maps as well. But they also weren't when Gladiators were winning. It's just like, you can't. I feel like some of their fans have placed some unreal expectations. You have to understand, I think Glads are going to be a lock for playoffs. Like, they're going to be one of the teams easily making play-ins at minimum. But there's a non-zero chance, especially if they ride the wave of Houston looking a little bit shaky. Again, Countdown Cup's going to shake up everything because we don't know the hero pool is.
Agreed.
The Glads could sneak in for a top 3 here, as could Justice, as could Outlaws, as could Reign. So I think, there's like 5 teams out of those, and Field, out of those 5 teams, I've conveniently left out the Shock, by the way. Out of those 5 teams, 3 of them, are to me, are a lock for an instant berth into playoffs. And Glads could easily be one of those teams. And they could do that without even making the Countdown Cup, by the way. So I think Glads are on their way. I think this is actually an incredibly good team.
You know what's really fun about this schedule? Is like their direct opponent for that slot, as you said, is Houston. Now, these teams play the same opponents, not in the same order. And at the end, they play each other. So
that's pretty fun.
Whoever gets in the end, like, probably deserved it the most, right? Like, that's a really, like, nice, like, spurt towards direct qualification, like top seed, if we assume that's going to be the case. And I guess we haven't announced the final format yet, even though I think Mr. X sort of spoiled that surprise a little bit somewhere. So, yeah, I mean, inherently, this is going to be, like, a super tight race at the end. I'm not sure if the order of operation matters too much, also because it's actually like they're playing Mayhem on the same weekend, on the last weekend, and then they're playing each other on that weekend. And then one team plays, so Outlaws plays Justice first, and then Atlanta, and for Gladiators it's the other way around, right? So it's not too different.
They
it's
play
actually
the same teams on the same weekend.
Yes. So it's reasonably the same, right? Like it's actually really nice how that turned out.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yep. Also,
it's exciting.
Theoretically speaking, dude. Okay, it's actually a little bit more exciting than that as well, because if Atlanta beats Chengdu, which I assume they will, then they are sitting at, don't let me lie, would it be 9 league points, right? That is on par with the other 2 teams. So,
while having won 2 less games in the regular season as well, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Just those 2 Hawaii trips, man.
So then they also have a pretty similar schedule to the others, where they play Gladiators, they play Houston as well, so they have the direct comparison there. Then they have also Mayhem. They unluckily also have Fuel. So, I mean, they have a murder stage, all things considered, for Reign. That's probably why they're also less likely to make it top 3. But it's still very possible, especially if they get like an upset victory on either Shanghai or Dallas this weekend, right?
Sure.
And get like the double points, direct qualification to the final or something like that, right? So, yeah.
Could be the play. Let's also briefly touch on, well, actually, we should probably talk about Washington a little bit here as well. And who else played in this stage? It's probably a decent shout. Let me just go over the schedule again. So we also had on the western side, just because we don't need to go over every single game, but I think we talk about Washington a little bit, and then we move on to potentially a quick shout to Boston, and then we get into the real Dallas Atlanta type of discussions as we get into the actual knockouts that happen. But yeah, I mean, Washington started to make a real big comeback this stage after a bit of shakiness previously. I think the real kind of disappointing result for them that they would feel sad about is their 0-3 to Atlanta. And a lot of this is just, look, Atlanta are just monstrous right now, aren't they? So it's like hard to look at that and be like, well, I mean, you're upset, but you can't be too upset as well. I think Atlanta were one of the two teams to beat. They've really done some massive catch up to be the team next to Fuel right now. But Washington honestly had a pretty good look now, and we can transition to this discussion into the actual knockouts, where you had Washington Paris, which ended up being a very close game, super tight game. I actually reviewed that game today on my stream before I came to the recording for this show. And in that particular game, I felt like watching it, as much as people say like, yeah, Paris came really close, I didn't feel like Washington were out of control. Even when Paris were up 2-1, watching the two teams play, I feel like Washington was generally more dynamic, more they had higher initiative, they had better tempo control. They were the more coordinated team at various parts as well. And Paris were, despite being ahead, not a lock into me. Like I don't sit at that 2-1 result. I know it's easy for me to say because I already knew the result beforehand. But objectively speaking, when I look at it and I see the 2-1 and I finish watching Hollywood, at that stage, I'm not thinking, oh man, Washington is screwed. There's no way they can win this now. Objectively speaking, obviously, again, the context is I did know the result. But I mean, and that, then you see the Route 66 game, and Paris really looked lost on that map. They were slow, they were indecisive, they had poor objective control, and they kind of got ran over there. And then, eventually Washington just kept on taking control. And this wasn't even like some superstar decay performance or anything like that. I think Washington just were hitting on all cylinders more than Paris were, generally speaking.
Yep. I think the one big thing that I was not seeing from Paris, that we did see later or earlier on the stage in the Summer Showdown, was their kind of more creative looks. I think that did kind of shake the balance for a lot of teams, and I think that could have been what swung the tide in this Washington game, especially on control. I think on Route 66 it's a little bit harder to argue, but if memory serves, I think they were trying to run double shield on it earlier. Think about that what you want, but I think there is something to
Paris.
I believe Paris, not in this match in particular, but earlier on this
All right.
season, I think in their reverse sweep, but I could be wrong. It might have been an icon wall now that I kind of think on. But I think control on Busan, I think there are arguments to be made for some different looks that they could have thrown out that may have thrown Washington off their game, maybe disrupting the tempo or the natural rhythm that they kind of settled into. That they've shown, right? Paris have shown to be a little bit Gladiators-esque with this, some of their looks, where it's not necessarily the meta or what we're kind of establishing as the standard meta, but they're kind of throwing odd little pokes and odd little jabs that I think
Some of the
throw a
looks
lot
aren't
of
good
people
though.
off the game.
I don't think
Agreed.
some of the looks are good. I looked at that match, and look, this is in a vacuum. I haven't reviewed that many Paris games, to be fair, so that's the caveat we'll throw in.
Sure.
And maybe there are better Paris examples of better games they play with Ball Sombra. I did not enjoy their Ball Sombra versus Washington.
No.
I thought it was not coordinated. And this is, by the way, because I've been spoiled by Chengdu Shanghai Ball Sombra, which is very coordinated. And going from that to this, and that's not saying Washington's Ball Sombra was super
Any
coordinated
better.
either.
Yeah, no.
But it was, well, I mean, it was better. It was better than Paris's.
Sure.
That's
fair.
definitely going to give them a win. Like Mag Assassin did a better job than Dan Naga for sure. I think Naga. I am the ball aficionado, by the way. I think Naga Sombra to me left a bit to be desired. But then again, maybe I'm just spoiled by Lip again. So it's just too much Shanghai that has spoiled the broth. Really, you've tasted the soup of the gods, and it's just everything else beyond that is just rubbish, isn't it? So, but what I'm trying to get to is, yeah, I think Paris, maybe they could have been a little bit more vertical in their pillar. This is like almost the opposite of Houston, where they were super vertical in one pillar, and then that crushed the crash down because they chose the wrong one. Sadly, Paris kind of perhaps maybe hedged their bets and never got good enough at one comp. They tried playing too much, and they looked too average on all of them. And you'll say to me, but hang on, didn't they still win 2 maps versus Washington? Yeah, I'll give that to you. But for example, I think Washington could have won Hollywood. I don't think Paris getting that full hold was a given. I think Washington could have absolutely have captained won Hollywood. Yeah. So that's not even like, you can't just go on to Liquipedia and just click the result and be like 1-0, haha, Paris better team, boom, and just put that up. No, it's not. If you actually look at the map, I think it was very winnable for Washington, and they let it slip through their fingers. So yeah, I think the one area Washington, here's the criticism, is I don't think Mag on the Rhine is that good to me because, and this is the contention. This is my hot take of the week because people are gonna be like, well, didn't Mag diff Fearless? That's the narrative.
Yeah.
That's the current Reddit narrative. To me, I think Mag is going too ham. I think he's channeling too much bumper, and it's punishing their team because, especially versus Paris. I mean, look, Mag on Hollywood was at points just actually feeding. His Ryan goes so deep, and his team is not there. And like, bro, why are you standing here right now? Like, he is going for like very specific pins. There was a Hanamura game as well they played. Yeah, on Hanamura, he went for a pin that was like, bro, if you fail this pin, you are in the middle of nowhere and you are dead. And the only reason that pin worked is because he landed on the sim perfectly. There was Naga. And then off that pin kill, he got a shatter. If he doesn't get the pin kill, he doesn't get a shatter. And then he 180 shatters, and he's praying that Dan doesn't have a shield up. And it just so happens that Dan didn't have a shield up. So many things through it's partial RNG and partially him, calculating the risk. I'll throw him that bone, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. But there's enough risk in there that I don't think it was worth taking because all that needed to happen was he doesn't get the pin or Dan holds his shield up and that entire play doesn't happen and he looks like a fucking feeder and we're having a different discussion.
Yeah, I mean, if you disagree with AVRL, I think he has a beautiful clip that highlights this. Granted, it's a play-in game, but I think it's Justice on Nepal Village, and Mag is rounding the corner and just gets eliminated.
I mean,
that just gets obliterated.
I don't know if that's his fault though. Like,
I don't think the burst is his fault, but rounding the corner into a the mirror matchup is
doesn't hold up a shield. He doesn't shield. He doesn't shield. He rounds the corner swinging for some reason. He chooses not to shield round the corner. There's no reason not to have your shield up there.
Sure, it's greedy. There is a risk that you could be bursted. Not that fast, right? I don't think anybody's looking at that like that's probably a world record of how quickly somebody dies. But taking that much on the chin, as much as that's going to be taken out of context, like that's a lot of greed just to be rounding the corner swinging. Like that's a little egregious. And I think that speaks to AVRL's point that he's being a little bit too aggressive. However, to kind of defend him for a moment, I think Justice needs a direction to go. And if that is forward, okay, fine. I think we just need to dial it back a little bit because one of my big criticisms for them has been their separation. They seem to be kind of directionless. They don't know where they're going. Mag's going one way, Decay's going in. Like there is a separation. So if it is going to be forward,
Mag is still going one way and he's going in bumper style and feeding. That's still happening.
But I think the criticism that I would give is that teams need to kind of follow him in. Like the team has to commit to that, and there isn't a full trust in that just yet. He is a little aggressive, but I think if we dial it back, a little
aggressive. All right.
Yeah, a little,
just a tad, smidgen.
Just a smidge.
Just so nice today. Oh,
yeah,
what's going on? What's wrong with you?
Just a peachy boy. The only other thing that I'll say on Justice Paris is that I think if we could draw into question the Hollywood game, I would draw into question Hanamura. I think Paris underplayed that really hard. I was not a fan of Onigod in his TP usage. I was not a fan of Vestola on a number of fights, especially on their attack, just kind of being in weird positions. I think if that a few different things happen, I think they could have locked that down personally. But I think it was a close game. I think it was a good game. But
yeah. I think Paris are nearly there. I don't like let's be clear about something. I love Paris as a team. Valor and Get Amazed do a fantastic job. I think what they've done with this team is worthy of all the praise.
Hacking-esque.
Yeah.
But what I want to say is you can't let that cloud, and not speaking to you guys specifically, just people, you can't let that cloud your judgment of looking at their team objectively and saying,
sure,
perhaps they were still the weaker team versus Justice. Because there is a group of people out there that are going to look at that game and be like, oh man, Washington beating Paris is such an upset. Like, Washington are worse than Paris. How'd they beat Paris? That's an upset. I'm like, no, bro, that is not an upset. No. Washington were definitely the better team in that matchup.
Yep.
100%. But Paris are close. I don't think you can... Like, Paris, to me, are a solid midfield contender.
Mm.
I would say, like, from what I gathered from the Dallas Fuel camp, they definitely felt pressured by Mac in that match and went like, oof, this boy went crazy against us. Like, that was close. Yeah. Like,
when he lands hard, but it's the accuracy.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
What
the
can I
problem.
say? It's because there's a shock factor there. Well, not shock the team, shock and awe.
Mhm.
Right? When you have this guy, this bumper guy in your face, like, hang on, what the hell's this?
Yeah.
That's scary. That will put some level of fear in you. And that you have to play around that when that happens. But then you realize it's like, hang on a second, this is actually really punishable. And once that clicks, and they're like, okay, now he's actually just feeding.
Yes, but like I still would. I get what you mean. I know you don't mean it in that way, but I think it bears pointing out like there's a wide difference between Bumper and Mac doing that, and then doing someone like Checkmate doing that, right? Like they
Sure.
understand limits, and to a degree, it's also probably like if that works, it's also a team effort that it did, in the sense
Mhm.
that you probably have a flex support that's got your back. And there's a possibility where that isn't always the case for Mac, or like, yeah, of course, he could be too much on the pedal as well.
Right.
It's super hard to make the judgment call always in Overwatch, like who didn't move in on the call or whatever.
Oh,
But yeah,
okay.
like I think it's not that this is like an unskilled problem. It's probably like someone that exactly knows where it is and wants to make that place. And also, like, since he has been doing that more, I think Justice has just become a better team. Like, I don't
Mhm.
think he should be stopping that. If
No,
anything,
not
the
at all.
team should like allow him to do that more.
Well, Vancouver did write the script. What I'm saying, with the old Vancouver wrote the script, and what I'm saying there is like, I don't disagree, but there is also, and this is the hardest lesson to learn for all the Ryans that want to be copycat bumpers, bumper lights, diet bumper, everyone, all of those out there,
Bumper sticker.
is that there is still a right and wrong time to go in, and it's not as
Yeah.
simple as team follow me in or team didn't follow me in, oh, therefore team bad. Why doesn't team follow me in? There are still just straight up wrong times to be going.
Yes.
And even if your team did follow, you'd be, instead of one person feeding, now it's 6 people feeding.
Yeah.
There are still wrong times to go, and that's the hardest lesson to learn. But I mean, yeah, look, if we're looking at like what is the real possible potential in terms of like success, Vancouver Titans season 2, that's your blueprint right there.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're close. I think they're close to being that, big lots Titan that can just be super aggressive. If you're gonna feed 6 people, then you hope to God that the other 5 members can kind of clutch it out or will or invest the number of ultimates to kind of swing that fight. I think that is a direction the Justice can go, and I think they're pretty close. I'd like to see that continue in a weird way. I like that style. I think it's interesting.
Any we're gonna move on to East really quickly now.
Yeah.
Very soon. I think we'll finish West with a bit of Atlanta preamble before we get into East and then eventually tournament. Because Atlanta's the other team we really got to talk about here. But that Atlanta Los Angeles game, and there's some other games in there. Oh, let's bring those other games up first, and before we get into that Atlanta Glads game, because I got a lot to say on that one, and I'll won't be too greedy on that, hopefully. But 3-0 versus Washington, obviously, talking about that. 2-3 versus Dallas. Now, that should have been one of the early warning signs that, like, oh, hang on. Atlanta could be a pretty deadly team here. Some people did kind of get, there was a bit of early, and, there's the narrative out there, like, oh, Dallas first week, they look like they struggled. They only beat Florida 3-2. They only beat Atlanta 3-2. Well, Dallas, they lost their magic. They're only struggling now. A little bit of that could be true, but Dallas, it doesn't take them long to really get into it. But I think Atlanta, that was also the first sign that Atlanta were really starting to pick up their, the pacing, and then they completely dominated London and dominated Boston in pretty equal fashion. We go through, and eventually we get to the actual knockout game versus Gladiators, and it was a mega close game.
Yeah.
I reviewed that, and
Last
I
fight.
think both teams played at such a high level. This is why I think Glads can't be too disappointed with this, because if you look at this objectively, you have to know your team actually played super well.
Mhm.
And unfortunately for you, Atlanta played a better game. Sometimes it's the way it goes. And people will go back to like, why did Kevster play Farah? Why did they play ball? Why doesn't Gladiators just play this or play that? You have to understand Gladiators as a team, their identity is to be flexible. And they are a team that want to play what they believe is going to be the best counter comp or the best composition for a specific map, especially versus their competition. And you have a team that has the capability of flexing, and they're going to flex when they can, because they can do that, and they have found success doing that. So it's not like randomly they went off script. Like, no, guys, we're not going to follow the road. Well, it's time to go off road and carve our own path and just go for the fire because of memes. And that's not what happened, guys. They went to fire because it was a pre-planned thing that if you go to Nepal and we get to Shrine, we were always gonna play fire.
Yeah.
Kevster locked in the fire in one straight away. There was no hesitation. That was part of the plan. They had always planned to do that. It wasn't a random thing. They didn't go off road. They stuck to the road. They stuck heavily to the road.
Yep.
So, and yeah, okay, it punished them. But let me put this out there. If they had won with that, you'd be praised like, wow, DP9 again. Wow, Kev's the fucking galactic universal brain. So smart, go fire. If they won, you'd be praising them. You'd be sucking their nuts. But because they lost, you're calling for DP to be fired. It's ridiculous to me.
Right.
This is going to be a key match that I think is going to shape the narrative going into the Summer Showdown top 4. I do believe that this will be a case study in what I think Asia is going to do to the West. Just better.
Do you agree, Avril? You want to agree?
What do you mean? What do you mean, Joe?
Without getting too deep into it, I think the look that Gladiators showed Atlanta is not too far off what I think a lot of the Eastern teams can do. And I think that should scare a lot of Western fans.
What is it? So you mean
specifically like the ball poke, super slow?
Right.
Yes.
Because I'll say one thing. I think Gladiators did not show capabilities of what a fire can do.
Agreed.
I don't think their ball players is as good as Shanghai and Chengdu.
Agreed.
And part of that is just because, sorry to muse, but Fate and Gaga and Amon, they're just better.
No, I don't think there's anybody would disagree.
Yeah.
Simply fucking, but Joe, you'd be surprised.
Fair enough.
There are people
I
on
try to
Reddit
stay away from Reddit.
There are people on Reddit that keep like, oh, the APAC sims. I'm like, bro, you don't watch a single APAC game. Shut the fuck up. You don't get to call. You don't get to say that.
Yeah.
You only watch NA and you only listen to people that talk about NA. You don't know anything about APAC. Stop talking.
Yeah.
So I'm here to educate the people that don't watch APAC as to what's actually happening in APAC. So I don't think Gladiators play the cleanest or the actual potential of what fireball actually is. And even then, Chengdu could tighten the screws a little bit there. Fleta can come out on fire, so Shanghai can definitely give you that look if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Tracer, like that, you got Lip Tracer, which his stat. I've been looking at his stats on Tracer; they're still pretty impressive. They're very damn good. You have Gladiators that didn't look good on fire, and I think that taints a view where now suddenly people are like, well, why would you play fire here? It's so bad. I'm like, yeah, but they didn't do a good job of playing it.
Yeah, that's it. They just underperformed.
It
makes sense.
They didn't play any off angles. They didn't try and put Kevster on an off angle. He was shooting shields the whole time. He was shooting into Hawk Matrix, and then he nano barrage directly into Hawk Matrix and died. Like that's not peak fire. I'm sorry, that's not it. But Glads otherwise had great like then there was the other round in Nepal. I can't remember which one it was where they blasted Atlanta. It was not close. They got a really clean win off their brawl.
Mm-hmm.
And so Glads had really decent games. I think Atlanta to me are just too strong to have lost in that matchup. Like if Glads make any mistake, then Atlanta were going to pounce. And Atlanta have really grown as a team to the point where I think they're a solid top team in NA that is not going to move for the rest of the year.
Yeah. I don't know. They always, and I felt this way since last year, they feel very spiky. They're going to hit a peak if they can play within their wheelhouse, and I think that wheelhouse is very predicated around that tank line. If you can give Gator Rhine, if you can give Gator Orisa, they're going to thrive. If you're going to give Hawk Diva, Sigma, they're going to thrive. If you start to tinker with that, if you ask them to play ball, if you ask them to play monkey, it starts to diminish. Outside of that, yeah, I think they're a good mid-pack team, but when you give them their wheelhouse, they can win a title. I do believe that.
But like giving people their wheelhouse, like that stuff has worked like for Dallas pretty much every stage now. You make that your wheelhouse, right? Like
I'm genuinely wondering if that's I don't know if every team can have their players buy into that. You know what I mean? We can project that onto a lot of teams. Like, why don't you just play your own style?
Carpenter that can fabricate a wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Or is, I mean, yes, it's also on the quality of the players for sure, but you could also argue that just inherently, like, Atlanta's wheelhouse of the double shield type of styles is just inherently worse, or like in most positions worse than whatever.
It just depends.
Everyone
I think it
else is
depends on
playing,
the patch that we're playing.
Yeah.
And then yes, what you just said, I think it depends on like how that matches up versus what everybody else is playing. It is hard to, it's sometimes hard to force, but I think it is a core to the game that we will eventually return to. But it's outside of that I think they tend to not struggles too aggressive, but underperform, let's say, or not necessarily meet expectations versus the opposite.
I don't even think
Yeah.
their double shield is like their. I mean, everyone's going to say that's their signature comp. But then you hear me saying like, I don't think it's the right composition for this meta because maybe Houston just didn't play the peak that Atlanta did, which is the truth. But I actually think like, and maybe Atlanta discovers this in Hawaii. They'll discover, hey, maybe double shield ain't it, because versus APAC, Sombra Dive, and all that, it's just like it's not good enough. And then they'll go to Brawl, and that's fine. I think eventually, well, Atlanta probably will realize that they are going to play a Brawl, and their Brawl is excellent. I don't look at their double shield and think like, yeah, this is Atlanta's identity. I actually think their Brawl is pretty damn good. They're good enough that they can just abandon this double shield and go directly towards that, and they'll have a fun time. They'll have a great time.
Yep, I agree. I think the identity around Atlanta is that they are a deathball team. They want to play slow. They want to play Rhine. They want to play Diva. They want to play Mei. They want to be this team that gets in your face. The issue is that if you put them in an ecosystem where it's difficult to get into your face, or that asks them to play, more mobile heroes, it gets a little dicey. Not in a bad way, just not at the same peak that they would if they were playing within their comfort picks. That's all. Good team, great team. Right now, I think they're going to. This is, I don't know. I'm out for sorts with Atlanta going into the tournament, but we'll get to them.
I will also say, Jesus Christ, dude, Iris on BAP is different, dude.
I've been sleeping on the kid. I will eat that. I will take that L.
Sorry?
But Iris, yeah.
Yeah. Like he was diffing Shu.
Yeah.
And you statistically,
I'm trying to remember if I saw that or not. I saw great plays from both players, but I don't disagree. I still think Shu played a great game. But yeah, Iris his BAP was pretty different. I made a tweet, by the way, speaking of support players, that I thought Master played a fantastic game.
Yeah.
Master's one guy in Atlanta Reign no one ever brings up. Everyone's like, wow, Edison, so well, maybe not everyone talking about Edison, but like Edison, Tracer good, and oh my god, Pelican rookie. Kai best Western sniper, and Hog best Western tank duo, and oh my god, Iris so underrated, so good flex support, and then they just stopped talking. There's just nothing.
Yeah,
bro, you forgot about Master. And then I watched this match.
Goats.
Hog and
Master,
Diva,
I'm like, dude, Master is so underrated on this team. Master's actually doing so much.
Yeah,
Masa is there right when you need him every single time. He's a rock that this team counts on every single meta, and he just keeps performing. He's a stud. He is an absolute maniac. Even going back to Melee, I thought he had an interesting look. They had him doing some maid marking, if you want to kind of call it that, which I thought was super interesting. But yeah, a consistent foundation for this team to kind of pull from. Absolutely.
Lucio's great. Great coordination. I think the Nepal village was some of the highest tier coordination from both Gladiators and Rhine. I was so impressed by both teams. I'll have a video out on that at some stage, I'm sure. I'll just say it so I can keep myself, I can make sure that
accountable.
Hold accountable. But we are going to talk about East now before, we spend a lot of time on West as we usually do, and now we're going to speed run through we spend a lot of time on West, so we have to speed run through the East now because we're probably going to end up running out of time if we don't. Let's go over broad strokes here real quick. Shanghai Dragons homestand, obviously great looking event. Get that out of the way. Very slick, very well produced. Love the art style, everything they did there. Just a beautiful, packed out as well. Venue looked incredibly packed out. They looked like they were at capacity. This was Shanghai just continuing to roll, but they did lose one map. Shanghai lost their first map of the stage to Hangzhou Spark off Shy Goose Rate MCD hitting all their shots. Shy especially went full sicko mode on Hollywood. Like he would not miss a headshot. That was one of the best McCree performances I've seen since Big Boss Pine on Ilios. Like I've not seen a McCree performance that good since that Big Boss Pine clip. So
your
it was
reaction
actually
to the high noon play made me crack up. Like when he kills one with high noon, like hits the headshot, then like knows exactly the blink distance and flicks to the tracer as well, and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
It's just
I do those. Those are my favorite parts of the cast. A lot of people like that. Some people said like, oh, they don't like that, but I think a lot of people do like that song and keep doing it. That's just my reactions I like to do. Everyone likes react videos, so I just like Overwatch League caster reacts to shy sick headshot. And there's the thumbnail is just me like, that's the thumbnail.
That's our thumbnail now. I can promise you that.
It's a double use, two birds, one stone here. So what I'm trying to get to is it was a good showing from Hangzhou, but they couldn't quite rescue the stage because the 0-3 lost to Seoul, which by the way, and now we can start officially talking about Seoul as well. And you asked me earlier about what I think about Seoul. So Seoul baited everyone with that win and baited you guys into predicting Seoul. I didn't predict Seoul. So my first thing is, Yiska, do you actually have to do a half marathon now or what?
No, because okay, so the bet is we have like a prolific shit poster about in our Discord, and like basically the bet was that I can't be worse than him in Preds, and it got down pretty close, too close for comfort. Fortunately, he predded. Okay, he first didn't pred. Then I allowed him to say who he thought was going to go to Hawaii, and he went Atlanta and Paris. And no, was it? No, Washington, Paris.
I think it was Atlanta,
Washington,
Paris.
Yeah, something like that.
I think it was Paris.
Definitely on that Paris juice right there.
And I mean, now I'm decently ahead. I guess he can still catch up if he gets like the brackets right. I think it's like a 4 or 6 point difference now. But yeah, me predding Seoul this stage has not been kind to me. Like,
no.
But why are you blaming me, by the way? You're like, I somehow convinced you to pick Seoul. What did I do? What? I have nothing to do with this.
I mean,
he's easily swayed. He teeters to peer pressure.
At what point have I told you to pick Seoul?
I mean, pretty much the entire preseason, and then the cursed results.
Oh, okay. So my comments in March. Okay, well, I understand now. So in July, you're still holding on to that. Even though since March I've said very different things.
Preseason scrim.
Exactly. This is the man who's made a career on somehow astrologizing scrim bucks. You know, if there's anybody to blame, it's anybody but his own eye test, because it's only the stock exchange.
I'm pretty sure since then I've been pretty public about me being a bit more, so and so on Seoul, and not as like, oh man, yeah, Seoul are great. And now I'm like, oh, I don't know. The last good comment I made about Seoul was saying that Prophet would be the next, he'd be the best tracer after Striker, and then he got owned by Lip Flitter and Leave subsequently after that. So I'm like, well, I guess that narrative's dead.
Actually, not sure if he got owned, by the way. Like, he almost deadlifted again against Chengdu.
Okay, that's true.
Like, yeah, it's just a team.
Okay, I'll take on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, he saved them on Junket. Yeah, I guess he rescued them on multiple points as well, and he had a good performance.
It's just like this team is just the thing is, now that you verbally convinced me on this podcast that they're not hot shit anymore, that just means I will pred against them next stage, and then they will
and then lose.
No, then I will lose, and then they
will
win.
Will lose, and then you'll predict them the second go around, and then they'll lose.
Dude,
and ironically, what will happen is I'll show you my preds. I'm like, yeah, I predded Seoul. Why wouldn't you? You didn't pred Seoul. Like, what's wrong with you? That's what will happen.
And the worst part of it all will be that Gesture will be playing 100% of the maps for no reason and will be absolutely monstering everyone. Like, it's just like, I guess, like, it's the last quarter of the season. Might as well start playing Overwatch again in my free time. Like, I don't know.
I still believe in, like, okay, Profits is not Flitter, not Flitter Lip.
Yeah.
But Fitz had such a good game. When Fitz is on, bro, he is on. He single-handedly just carried the shit out of Seoul on Shrine Nepal versus Chengdu on map 5. I remember on that cast, specifically in that game, I said something like, at the start, at the beginning, before we saw any action, I only saw the compositions and I saw what they're rolling out. I'm like, okay, Late Young's going on a Diva, sorry, on a Zarya. There's no Diva. Fitz will have no pressure. Fitz is he's going to be monster this game. He is going to be banging. And then in the middle of the cast of that, I said, like, dude, Fitz right now is doing so much work that if Chengdu don't shut him down, he's going to be unstoppable. And then at the end, I'm like, dude, he hasn't died. Fitz still has 0 deaths, and he's tripling the damage of the other DPS. He's doing as much damage as the rest of the 3 DPS combined. And so it's just like the entire thing was laid out from front to back in terms of how that was going to go. And Fitz did not disappoint until we got to the other maps. No, I'm kidding. But he didn't shut down Jinmu, but whatever. It's hard. It's hard. I looked at Fitz's POV as well as a McCree. Jinmu's angles are so good that there's very little Fitz can do about him. That's what I'll say.
I think it feels like he's kind of known for coming in, like the second that you see him, he's just like 180 above your head. Like he is in such bizarre, like not head level angles that it feels weird to kind of like adapt on the fly. It's not comfortable in that way. Is that kind of what you saw?
Who, me?
Yeah.
I think Jinmu knows his angles very well in terms of off angles. The way I review Fire is I think Fire needs to really take advantage of taking eyeballs away from his team towards him or the opposite. So you always have this 180 kind of crossfire angle going on in the sky. And you'll notice when you watch Jinmu's angles, he sets those up very effectively with especially conking, using concussive blast to get around the map. And he knows his matchups very well. I think he's the best air to ground Farah. Notice I'm very specific with that because I think if another player challenged him in the air as Farah, his air to air Farah might not actually be that good. Because apparently Yveltal beat him 26-2 in the Farah 1v1.
That's wild.
I don't know if I'll take that too seriously, but I've seen so much Jinmu ground air to ground. I have no doubts there, but I've not seen enough Jinmu air to air to know what would happen if someone actually tried to challenge him. And who knows? Maybe only Sparkle can do that. But that'll be more in the preview show. So let's finish up about like our other thoughts about East as we start heading into more Chengdu Shanghai based discussion. But generally speaking, I think Goose Ray Shy is still dominantly carrying the Hangzhou Spark, and maybe they'll be to do more with that later on. But I hope I think Philadelphia, man, they are a team I want to support and I want to back so heavily. And I predicted Philadelphia to win both their games, and I got punished. I lost my points because of Philly. Sag. The New York game is probably the most egregious of them. Them losing to Chengdu. Do you guys remember last week when I said Chengdu could beat Philly because Shanghai wrote the blueprint, and Chengdu can just be like, "Hang on, we're Shanghai light. We can do this too." Yeah. I said that.
Yeah. And then we assume.
I didn't even believe it. I didn't even pray Chengdu. I hate myself.
We assumed that Light Young was going to be a hole for this team, and if anything, he is kind of the benefactor of their style. Weirdly enough, which we'll get into. I don't know.
He's forcing Zarya way too often, and Fitz.
See, I don't think that's a problem though. I don't think that's necessarily going to be a problem for them.
Zarya's not a good hero. He forces Zarya too often. He needs to play more Diva. That's just me.
Fair enough. We'll agree to disagree there.
Whatever, they still won. That's fine.
I mean, it's definitely not the reason why I think it's good, but I think that we'll save that for the tournament. Philly in particular, they did not have an answer for ball. They couldn't play it, so they opted in for the bait that is Sombre May. It does nothing for you. It is the most passive DPS line you can pick into this.
Someone tell them one of the biggest counters the ball is Tracer. Someone tell them that.
Who do you want to play Tracer?
Yeah, who plays Tracer?
They're kind of like Houston. They're just in a weird position in this meta. I'll give
because they don't have a Tracer.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like
Houston has a Tracer.
At least Houston has a Tracer.
Sure, they have a Tracer, but they don't have another Dante.
Right. Yeah, but like it would be good start for them to have a Tracer, and then have any like. If they had a Tracer, they wouldn't have a problem because they have 3 excellent DPS that could slot into whatever other think they
Agreed. Agreed. I think the Tracer Sombra dynamic for Philly is something they have to kind of solve. They don't need to solve it now because they kind of can't. But I think Countdown, depending on what DPS are played, I think I give, if we're going to head Houston Philly, I like Philly's depth and the DPS that they have against Houston's two that are very good.
Why can't they solve it? Either one of Shockwave, EQ, or Rascal has to play it. I've said this.
Sure, they're just not extremely comfortable. Let's
It was Sparkle, and now Sparkle's more than he's beyond serviceable now. And look, okay, that's a bad example. I brought up Dallas again. Shame on me. Just be like Dallas. But I mean, actually, though, yeah, kind of. Yes, also.
You kind of need to be. I think Shockwave has to. I think he's the kind of last hope. Is that he's can come in and fill in the gaps in a very short amount of time. I don't know what they've had him practicing in the downtime when he's not been in Korea. Hopefully it has been Tracer, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it's not. They're in a weird look because Rascal's not doing a great job at it and hasn't been for, I think, since May. EQO still looks a little uncomfortable on Sombra, if I'm going to be completely honest. I think they could have adapted. I think if there was a way out, I think it was the brawl stuff that the Western teams are doing. But yeah, they just decided to.
They did though. They did do the brawl, and they lost. It's not like they didn't play brawl.
Yeah.
Did you know that no one? Did you know they didn't shoot Jinmu? Did you know that what map did Jinmu play fire again? It took Junkertown. Was it Junkertown? Oh, I can't remember. There was one map where they specific, and I remember this because ZP molded on cast.
Sure.
For good reasons, justified molding, where it took until the very end for Carpe to be like, maybe I should play McCree. And then they lost. Like, it took them till the very fucking end. And it's just like, bro, Jimu's been farming your team this whole time, and it takes you this long to decide maybe McCree's the answer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there's just some teams that are so set in their ways and in their preparation, right? Like that. They're not allowed. Like, I don't know. Like, for instance, I think whenever Doom comes out for Dallas, that's not something that they've like practiced, right? That's just at the discretion of Sparkle to make that call. If he's feeling it, whatever, right? You need to be in that kind of position pretty much with every team if you want to be successful, to just like allow your star players to like just shine that moment. And yeah, maybe Kape wasn't feeling it that day either, and maybe you just should stick to the plan in that case, but I don't know, dude. Like, I think you just need to be flexible sometimes, and also probably play stuff that on paper doesn't even make that much sense, but if you're like in that moment just like making the difference, that's probably your best out at that point. Highest expected value.
The perfect example you're talking about, Yiska, is actually Chengdu in their 5-map series to get into the Summer Showdown versus whatchamacallem?
Seoul.
Seoul, where on Sanctum, the last map, on the last sub-map of Nepal, the last map of the 5-map series, the how it goes, and this is coming through some translations, how it went apparently is Leave goes to Jinmu, like, what do you want to play? And Jinmu's like, yeah, I can do either Sombra or Fire. They're both good here. And Leave's like, do you want to put on a show? And he's like, all right. And he locks in the Fire. They just lock in the comp based on that.
Yep.
So they're so flexible. They're so willing to trust their star players. And fuck it, I'll say it. Jinmu's a star in the Fire. If there's one hero you can give him, you say star power, it's Fire. They're so trusting to be like, look, if you're confident and you think locking this is going to give us the win, you do that 100%. We will back you 100%. And that's the makings. That is the foundation of what could be a really good team.
Yeah.
Yep.
100%.
Yep. It's to Philly's minor defense when it comes to like not shooting upwards. I have to scramble so hard to try and defend this team.
Many a team fallen short to Chengdu because they failed to shoot upwards.
It really feels like that. Like, it feels like they identified Gaga was the problem when I think the immediate issue was Jinmu's Farah. They keep wanting to shut down the ball. And I think that's, again, my hypothesis is that the Sombra May look that a lot of teams kind of rotate into is for ball specifically, and not like it leaves you so open literally everywhere else. It's just not
Can I
worth
back
it.
you up? I'm going to back you up, Joe, and say that part of this is also not as easy as just shoot fire forehead.
Sure, of
Because
course.
we've also acknowledged, right, just previously, just I don't know how many minutes ago, but just previously when we were talking about Chengdu more in depth, that Jinmu's angles and fire are so exquisite that you can't just simply shoot him.
Sure.
Like Fitz's McCree was very on point in their matchup versus Chengdu. And looking from Fitz's POV, it's like I'm like, I don't blame you, buddy. It's hard to shoot Jinmu. He's playing such annoying angles that you can't just shoot him. Unless you want to stand in the middle of the open, you can't shoot him. He's not that easy to shoot. So a part of it is, yeah, you do shoot him forehead, and the other part of it is like, well, actually, it's too hard to shoot him forehead. Both are true at the same time.
It doesn't help that the comp that you're playing into it is as like close knit, so you can't even position your hit scan into like an open space. You can't have them just run flanks, because then like you lose the dynamic of the comp, right? Like the synergy of the comp is that it stays close together for the most part. Unless you're playing, you know, a ball with a hit scan like Seoul tried to, but even then it's like that already puts you at a disadvantage because that makes the hit scan diveable, right? Like there is no win. It's just you hope Jitmu isn't on, or you have to commit so many resources that it leaves you open elsewhere. Like it is a conundrum. It is a very difficult team to figure out.
Even if you kill him, you've auto reses him.
Exactly.
Then
Or
what?
they trade elsewhere. Like they're kind of playing like a split push in League of Legends, where they take objectives elsewhere. They're taking pieces, whether you like it or not.
That's the
You think it's
best
an advantage.
That is the best way I describe ball dive. And when I was doing, analysis on my stream where I'm like, okay, let me explain to you how this comp works. I sort of use that analogy. I try not to too much because there's probably not that many League fans that watch my content, but it's like, yeah, like this is League of Legends split push. You want to try and deal with a threat on this side of the map, they will trade an objective on the other side of the map while you're doing that.
Yep.
And so you can never like really shut them down. And that's
As long as it's hard to do.
Of ball dive. Ball dive has so many angles of approach and so many areas where they can attack you at, you cannot successfully ever fully shut them down.
Yep.
A good team.
Dude, like this entire thing has shaped my view of Overwatch so much, where I'm like, at this point, like, I do not believe if we had no hero pools that people would actually gravitate towards one composition. I think teams have really thoroughly understood that, like, they have ace players, and if they are on their day, it really doesn't matter that much what kind of meta state you're playing into. And I also don't believe, for instance, the stuff like that, let's say like season 2, stage 3, after stage 3 with Shanghai, I don't think necessarily that this team would have been figured out on the Farah composition when they would have themselves had the opportunity to innovate after the goat setups. It would have been just like an arms race to understanding how these meta situations work. I don't know. Like, I think at this point, like, it was probably good that Hero Pools just like made that very clear to teams that there is a style that for everyone that you can lean into, and there's a percentage that great players can unlock for you in every single composition that puts a heavy finger on the scale of meta compositions, and that just turns out to be the most effective way to play every single meta situation. And the fact that we're seeing so much success out of teams like Dallas, I don't know how you could argue against that at this point. Like,
I think I'd argue on the way you get to the conclusion, but I agree with the conclusion regardless. Okay. I don't think Hero Pools was necessary. I think we were always going to get to this position. It's just we forked and still met up, right? That's the only part I disagree with.
Yeah. No, I think...
Let's get deeper in the meta conversation. I know we skipped a couple teams in APAC. I think that's fine. For anyone listening, I know we didn't talk about Shanghai. We're going to get deeper into Shanghai because we still have the whole tournament bracket and everything. But we're already on the meta discussion anyway. So obviously, actually, was there more you wanted to continue there with Yiska before we talk about something else?
Just like that's something to keep in mind, especially for people that will argue to uphold hero pools in future competitions. Like, I don't know, dude. I think I think we're at a meta understanding point where we understand meta archetypes so well and understand individual skills and like idiosyncratic qualities so well that this goes beyond like this one singular meta type of composition where like what meta really is like it was just the case that, for instance, Shock and Vancouver just had their spike performances on these exact compositions. And that's why they became meta, because nobody else had the guts to...
It became an arms race.
Yeah.
It was, how do we get as good as them? We need to figure this out, because that's obviously what the best thing is. But I think that's like a natural progression of like games, right? Is you idolize, you chase after, and then you figure out, hey, I'm not going to play this rat race. I'm doing my own thing.
And the best teams in a region typically define that, which is why I think a lot of people copy Dallas in June.
Yeah.
But this is also where regions come into play, because how metas develop is that typically
correct.
The way it works is whatever gets you the most wins becomes meta.
Yeah.
Whatever seems to be the most effective thing becomes a meta.
Yeah.
And there is a bit of inherent confirmation bias there as well, where it's just like, well, if the winning team is winning, then it must be a better meta. Even though it's just like they could be winning just because they're the better team. You don't know that the composition is why they're winning.
Yep.
But they're winning because they're the better team. Like, I thoroughly believe if Shanghai can play a lot of different things and beat teams in the APAC region, but that's the side that. So what it comes down to is having different regions means you don't have this homogenous thing where like, oh yeah, well Vancouver and Shock are running the same thing, so I guess that's the meta now. And there's no like second opinion there. You don't have a second region where a different meta was developing with different answers to the question, because we're all trying to solve this puzzle. Like, what is the supposed best composition?
I think,
but
the one caveat is, isn't it possible theoretically that this is only true for the Overwatch we're playing in 2021, and that non-role lock, like state of balance that was around at GOATS actually made it so that undeniably Ghost was the best meta composition? Is that not possible?
I think if you go into what specifically some of the contender teams are running during GOATS, and you assume that Overwatch League teams do scrim against that, I think there's enough there to tease out or diversity. However, yes, I do believe that like non-role lock, there are some inherent issues that you really can't balance around, or it's very difficult to think so far outside of the box,
right,
a la Shanghai season or stage 3 season 2. That's like, that's not like it's a Roadhog diva meta, right? Where you have to just like throw spaghetti at a wall and try really abstract thinking to try and beat something like that. And I don't think that's necessarily healthy either. I think it's possible, it's just not necessarily healthy, because you do have to work through a lot of rigidity.
Yeah, the current game is the way it is. It definitely helps in terms of balance. And this is a upsetting take, and I'm sorry for the people that are going to be upset by this. But the fact that we've had no new heroes and no significant content to shake things up means teams can figure it out more. And the dev team, in terms of balance, can figure it out more, because there aren't as many outside variables or new variables that shake things up. Because every time a new hero gets added, well, it just scramble this, mix it all up again, and who knows. So there's that. But in terms of more meta discussion that's relevant to the Summer Showdown, we are obviously seeing, again, NA favoring more brawl, death ball type compositions, and APAC favoring more dive, split push, as you could probably call it, or just multi-angle, a solo individual but still coordinated into ball, sombra, trace, or whatever type of compositions. And we are going to have another regional clash of compositions, which is still my favorite thing in the current era of Overwatch competition.
Yeah, I think the one of the best decisions that the league has made is to separate. And I don't know if that's necessarily an accident because of COVID, or just the benefactor of it. It's hard to tell, but I think having these very clear, separate regions that operate in their own, practice environments, practicing against their own contenders teams, viewing the game in their own two separate ways. I think that clash of styles, again, is what makes competition so interesting. I agree that nobody wants to see mirror matchups 99% of the time, and that is like an opportunity that Overwatch gives us. So to bridge that gap, separating these teams, creating bubbles for them, and then having them meet intermittently, that's where you get the fireworks to hit. That's where you really get drama.
Oh.
That's where you can really start to sell people.
So what's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen?
Oh god.
Brawl versus Dive. So specifically, and let me be clear, it's Sim TP Brawl.
Yep.
Versus Ball Tracer Sombra Dive.
Also, can we take a vote? I've heard the name Ice Wizard run around for the NA meta. Do we like, dislike? Yay, nay?
I've heard Macrowave, so one of my viewers was very adamant it should be called Macrowave because of the Symmetra May thing.
Yeah. I
think Ice Wizard is a little bit easier. Macrowave is clever, but for some reason feels tedious to say because I want to just say microwave. I have to be very specific. No, it's like Macrowave, whereas Ice Wizard is just a little bit more just like, yeah, it's, you know, it just gets in there. What's the wizard part? Is that supposed to be Symmetra?
I think it's just like the TP of like Sim. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, dude. Okay, it's Sim Brawl. It's Sim
Sure,
Brawl.
that works.
Well, this is not. This doesn't have to be complicated. Okay, Sim TP Brawl tells you everything you need to know. Ice Wizard tells me like, are we watching Frozen 3? What is this? Anyway, and then you have you have Sombra Ball Dive.
You know that this discussion is not very unlike the who would win, dude? A Kodiak bear, a grizzly bear, or like a gorilla on rocky ground, which is basically the equivalent Overwatch fan equivalent of like who would win, Sim Brawl or Ball Dive in
Except
Hawaii,
we're actually going to get an answer. Except
we'll get an answer.
Going to fight.
Yeah,
is actually going to fight the jaguar or the what animal would you say again? Bear versus what?
Gorilla.
Gorilla. They are actually going to fight, and just so we're clear, the Kodiak bear is heavier and weight class and fighting doesn't matter. Just so we're clear. So yeah, we are going to actually get that clash, and you have people are going to say, oh, AVRL APAC biased again. And AVRL said last in June Joust meta that the APAC meta was high skill ceiling, and now he's on his same bullshit again. I'm like, okay, but let me explain a little bit. I know what the response is, so let me address that. I think, and back me up here, fellas, if you agree, that generally speaking, dive compositions are higher skill ceiling individually in terms of the mechanics of the heroes being played. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Tracer, Sombra, Genji, Echo, and that's just the DPSs. May Sim, I'm sorry, but May Sim is it ain't it, you know. Until we're talking flashy mechanics, no. Yeah, okay, yeah, you can right click some shit on May, and it's kind of cool. Like, oh, people's like, oh, what about putting up a wall? And it's like, oh yeah, no, is that really that impressive? Yeah, it's a good team ability, but I don't. That's just good ability usage. That's not like some crazy mechanics. I can put up good May walls in my games. Sure, my team aren't going to use them properly, or like maybe my reaction speed isn't going to be lightning quick. I'm not going to block a shatter with a May wall. I'll give the Overwatch League players that, but the fundamental understanding of like May wall, I don't think is that crazy. Like that's a brain thing. That's not a mechanical impressiveness thing. So I'm putting that out there. Ball, way higher skill ceiling in mechanics compared to like, I think the highest skill ceiling main tank in the game. Like, if you actually, people that don't know, have never played ball in their life, that actually don't know how ball works, might not understand just how much tech is in ball mechanics and how much you need to know to do ball stuff. You simply can't just do ball stuff. Like, to do ball stuff, you have to go through so much training to be good at ball. Like, it is a very hard hero to learn. And then, generally speaking, Zen is a pretty tough hero as well. Like, Brig is maybe whatever, but then, shut up, you got Lucio as well. But okay, we can argue that Lucio wall riding takes a bit of skill. I'll give you that. Generally speaking, though, the compositions played in APAC individually require more skill, and then combined, when you actually have to land that together and put it together into a well-coordinated dive, because it's not Death Ball, 6 players, act up tight together, walk forward, TP through, start swinging your hammer, and just put the lamp down at the right time. I'm simplifying that. I admit it. Slightly exaggerating, slightly hyperbolic. But then imagine now having a dive composition where you got 6 people that are not playing together. Only the Brig and Zen are actually stacked together. The other 4 players are doing all sorts of other things. And somehow you got to line that all up to concentrate that into one play. That's hard to do. Yep. So that's why I think the APAC skill ceiling is the APAC comps have high skill ceiling. And if you have teams like Shanghai in particular that have mastery over that, that should just be unbeatable.
Yeah, I literally couldn't put it better. It is the reason why I think the Western teams are going to struggle. I think, if anything, to circle back to that kind of season 2 rat race mentality, or the arms race of goats, I think the NA meta has benefited in some ways from that, but also it kind of is going to plague them. You look at a lot of control maps, you look at hybrid maps, funnily enough. They're all kind of leaning more towards, leading up to this tournament, there have been a significant sample size of just mirror matches of this May sim brawl. There is there's a lack of practice outside of that for the West. And I think we haven't seen a team like Chengdu, like Shanghai, that is so counter to that, that is so stylistically opposed, that is going to give NA a very, very difficult run for their money. You could say that the opposite versus you could literally flip the argument from NA and the East. However, I think the win condition for this Sim May composition is specifically targeting the supports, which you can counterpick against. I think you can play something like a Pharah Mercy that eliminates one support off the field, right? You can't just TP onto him and kill him. He's just going to fly away. He's going to fly to his Mercy. He's going to fly to a Diva, maybe a ball in the backline, right? Like, there are targets.
Survival trade.
Exactly, right?
We'll talk about this. If you trade, okay, you kill Zen, we kill your X or Y.
Yes,
we trade.
yes, you are okay with that. You can't completely remove a target from the sim made beat grinder that they're going to throw at you, but you're okay with that. You're handshaking that trade, saying you can have our Zen, but we're going to discord something, burst you enough to take this trade of this resource, and then get the kills to answer that trade, to take the objective elsewhere, to kind of, wrap it up with a pretty bow. I think it is the better composition. I think NA is behind. I think this is the meta that the East is bringing in and is going to dominate with, if I'm going to be completely honest. I don't trust where Dallas is at. I don't trust what Atlanta has shown me historically.
Sounds like we're making some preds. Should we get into that? Yiska, do you have anything to add, or should we get into some expectations for the tournament?
We can. I'm not. Yeah, it's going to be hard to sort of evaluate how meta will figure this out. I'm also not sure. Like, it seemed like, I think one thing that we got to caution about is, like, yes, you're running that meta now. We kind of saw that the last minute adaptations with the ball, for instance, for Shanghai. Can absolutely work in order to, like,
correct,
give you that win, right? So,
can I give you a counterpoint?
Sure.
Did the Western teams have time to practice that?
I mean, that's a big problem for them traveling to Hawaii, for sure. Yeah.
They do not have time to adapt to this. They're coming in with practice on the Sim Brawl. They have no time. Also, the Eastern teams get the time to be able to adapt to that. It is unfair, I think, inherently, but it's kind of the way the world is right now. It's unfortunate.
Both regions suffer from this. There's equal. But there is no other good ball. There's no good ball Sombra team in NA or an NA team to practice against to understand what it's like to play against it. Similarly, there's no good Sim TP Brawl team in APAC for other APACs to practice against. And the closest you get is to, like, a Philadelphia. Well, Philadelphia, the best Brawl team in APAC.
Yeah,
and maybe Seoul second to that.
Yeah.
So both regions, I want to say, are fairly unprepared for the other in terms of, like, trying to really adapt. Which is crazy to me is how Shanghai managed to swap over to Lucio Moira ball so quickly. I think they basically trusted their players to be able to perform on the roles mechanically, and then trusted Fake to just have enough impact that it ends up being what it needs to be. But all right, that is a good preview in terms of how we're going to get into the tournament expectations itself. Joe, you seem pretty confident on the APAC side of things. Generally speaking, I do agree with you. I give a lot of benefit of the doubt to Dallas until I have unreasonable. I hate myself for this because I'm generally, like, a very logical person who looks at reason more than anything else, and I hate that I give a free pass to Fuel, even though my brain tells me I shouldn't. But I give them a free pass anyway because beyond all expectation, they've always shown up. So my expectation here is, I think Chengdu are also kind of a one-trick team. The problem with Chengdu in that matchup is when I've seen Chengdu try Brawl or try literally anything other than a Ball Sombra, they have completely shat the bed.
I agree.
Now, do they need to play anything else other than what they're playing? Probably not. Hopefully not, for their sake. But they are incapable of changing and adapting. The reason why I look at them differently from Shanghai, despite and that's not even including the fact that Shanghai is just a better team with better players and high mechanics and better teamwork, but Shanghai also then have the capability to play other compositions if they really need to, and have shown that they can actually make those adjustments, whereas I don't think Chengdu can. I think the one major problem here, though, for the NA teams is that Shanghai and Chengdu, despite me calling Chengdu Shanghai light, they are still different enough that it's not like you can just prep for one and you've covered both.
Agreed.
Because Chengdu specifically then have this Farah thing that Shanghai don't do, and that's enough of a difference that you have to look at Chengdu through sort of different lens. Because you can't just like go for a 2-for-1 deal here. Because Shanghai are probably not going to play the Farah. They don't have to. Well, they
don't have to.
They both don't have to, and they don't really want to and feel the need to. Chengdu, it's not like Chengdu have to either, but they feel like they got a lot of success out of that.
Yes.
And so they're gonna. It's not even like, oh, it's an option. For them, it's a priority. If there is a good fire map, Chengdu are going to go fire almost straight away. It's not an option for them, it's a priority. That's the difference.
Yep. Agreed.
So because of that, Shanghai and Chengdu are actually not. They are similar, but they're also dissimilar, which means you have to prep for them differently. So I am going to be curious as to how the NA teams do that. But I expect Shanghai to definitely beat Atlanta. I'm sorry, Atlanta. I back them, but I back Shanghai way too hard to see Shanghai lose currently. And we saw Shanghai dismantle Atlanta last tournament as well on a good meta for Atlanta. On a bad meta, supposedly, for APAC in Shanghai. I will hate myself for saying this, but I'll give Fuel the win over Chengdu to start with, but we'll see how far they get after that. And then I have Shanghai beating Fuel.
So you have Shanghai firmly in the finals.
Currently, yeah. That's the one lock that I think it's hard to argue against.
Yeah, that's tough. Yep. If Shanghai's outside of the finals, then I don't know what world we're living in. Like, they look too good. Too coordinated, too many first kills, too frequently that they get first kills. Like, it's oppressive.
I will tell you, a lot of Western coaches believe that APAC is astronomically behind meta compositions. Now, I heard that's a lot, especially in those situations where Shanghai actually won the tournament, you know? So it's also just a thing. Like, basically what we're doing every meta stage is like we're putting like these two like microbes in a petri dish and then let them grow, and eventually we'll just let them fight and see like how stuff works out. So it's like
what
so
all you
abstract.
animals fighting? the two microbes, the petri dishes, grow up to be a silverback gorilla versus a Kodiak bear. And
now I wanted to express that it's really hard to like tell which microbe would be winning against the others, while it wouldn't be for a gorilla. It's against a Kodiak bear. It's obviously a gorilla, by the way. You're totally wrong about the bear winning.
What? Oh.
But
how much does? Oh yeah, I'm not gonna get into it. Should we get into it? No.
Yes, Yiska's seen way too many top 10 anime battles. You know, ranking Itachi versus Jiraiya. Dude. Like he's just too deep into it, man.
Like
weight and size is the primary factor in who wins those physical battles.
But
I'm not joking.
Gorilla
That's
is pure muscle though. And pure.
I can't believe we're getting this.
So what? A bear that's got a bit more fat can what?
I mean, they
got padding, yeah?
They
got higher constitutional. They got higher HP as we walk in. Right? What's the problem?
Half a year, you gain weight, I lose weight, and we'll have it in real life. I'll fly over to Australia and we can reenact that.
Well, it depends on what weight. Am I obese? Like, what are we talking? Like,
I mean, you can be in 5 months.
Obviously, I can't beat you if I'm obese. Like, you got to be fair about this. Like,
I mean, Kodiak bears are kind of obese, to be fair, but not like the jack silverback gorillas.
Sprint. Do you know how fast a Kodak can sprint at you at full speed? Like a fucking car. They
move. They move.
Really move.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's still not whatever. But my point was more like the microbes. You cannot really tell who's going to win. Like it's super like hard to figure out what until you see it happen, right? And in this particular position, like I agree with everything you said in terms of I think Fuel will win. I also think Chengdu will not they will maybe win a map. This tournament. Oh my god, this guy's already tilting me, dude. Okay, he's about to come in with some bullshit take. I think Shanghai has it easy. I have them 3-0 actually against Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
I also think that Shanghai will then beat the Fuel. It will probably be a little bit closer than 3-0. Not much. It could be a 3-2. Yeah, and I mean, I guess we can talk about how that goes from there then. But yeah, like also in the lower bracket, I think it's just going to be Atlanta again against Chengdu. Unfortunately, I don't trust the second pick in APAC. That's unfortunately the case.
Who's tilting you with their takes? What are you talking about?
I mean, Joe's about to come in with some bullshit. He's already like smirking and shit. Like,
can we land on one thing? I want to get Joe's take real quick after this, but we all agree that it will probably be Shanghai Dallas finals.
No.
Are we all there?
oh my god,
Okay.
shut up!
No. All right,
Shut
you go.
Hell up, dude.
I am very.
Oh, is Philly going to get there? Is Philly going to win it?
Yeah, Philly's coming in off the top rope with the steel chair. Agreed. Yeah. I think Dallas looked very, very shaky versus Washington, and I don't think that's some sort of backhanded compliment towards Washington, or it is kind of in a way. I don't think that they're like bad by any means, but I think this is more of an argument of Dallas being a little bit perplexed with how to deal with enemy dive, because they haven't been able to show, or they haven't practiced. Huh?
I just said they haven't been able to get Pine.
I mean, yeah, that's a big one. Even then, I don't know that. I think he'd probably be useful in this matchup versus the Chengdu Hunters, specifically due to the fact that, like you said, Pharah is a priority, not a choice, and I do think Shanghai could. I think they've shown it quite a bit on 2CP in particular on their defenses, that they could kind of splash it in and throw some teams off. And I think versus the Western teams, I think they will. I think, like I said, versus the Glads game, where they come out with the ball poke, they come out with like the Wrecking Ball Sombra Pharah compositions, I think, and I kind of expect that to be what Chengdu runs majority of the time. I do lean on the fact that Late Young is favoring Zarya. Is it a weird pick? I agree. I think what it does is it enables their star players to play even more aggressively, to press that even more in an advantage. So you're giving Gaga a bubble, you're giving Jinmu a bubble. They get to do even more dumb shit, right? I don't particularly like Dallas's options when it comes to getting back into the 6-man all-in. I don't think Lucio Moura is going to be acceptable into this composition. I think that's probably what they're going to have to run to find success, and I do have them doing it. But the way that I have this going, I think Dallas comes out with Nepal, wins control pretty handedly. I think Chengdu counterpicks. They lose on Volskaya. Dallas is 10-0, and I think that's Chengdu's best option when it comes to 2CP. Chengdu then gets another map pick. They go to Eichenwald. I think they win Eichenwald. I don't think that Dallas has enough experience. Not experience. That's not the right way to put it. I don't trust their 6-man all-in look nor their brawl to cover the ground that I think Eichenwald is going to give them, especially on B. So I have Chengdu winning B. On Eichenwald specifically, I have Chengdu winning Gibraltar for a lot of similar reasons. There's a lot of ground to cover, a lot of space, a lot of just all in to kind of throw at them. I don't like the mirror. I don't like their brawl. I do believe that the Eastern meta is what should be run, and I think Chengdu is going to kind of leverage that and reverse sweep them. To be completely honest, I think it's going to be 3-2 Chengdu.
This is the first game. Just to clear it up, we're talking about the very first game. Okay.
Yes, Chengdu beats the Dallas Fuel in winners round 1.
Yiska's face right now. Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
One thing I want to add is you say Nepal is a win for Dallas. Nepal is like a really good match for Pharah.
It is like Shrine's very good. I think Chengdu.
All three is really good actually, but yeah.
I don't particularly care for the ones that you have to win the first fight on. So like Control Center for Lijiang, these kind of maps like Sanctum, right? I think Chengdu's like crazy enough to run it. I don't particularly think it's like what you should.
They literally did. They did.
I know. That's what I kind of have them doing, but I don't know that I can write off Dallas Fuel that hard.
Can I tilt Yiska further before he speaks? my brain wants to go Chengdu beating Fuel for that game as well.
Mhm.
My heart won't let me because I give them way too much benefit of the doubt, and I can't bring myself to pred against them in that first game. But every fiber of my brain and my logic and reasoning tells me I should go Chengdu as a win versus Dallas in that first game. Yiska.
Then let me help you activate that other brain cell. It's quite apparently sleeping. Like that. Dude, like,
My other brain
you
cell
guys,
is Joe.
I swear to God, you guys go off the principle that Chengdu will play like their most consistently incredible games on their picks when like half the time they are standing in their own way, like failing to tie their shoes, as if that happens on every single map they're going to play. And like they haven't thrown spaghetti at the wall. Like the amount of times this team should have theoretically won against the opposition, and they're like mid-table in APAC in the
Agreed.
shittier region. Like, come on, guys. Like they're going to get a map against this weekend. Like, dude,
Chengdu are peaking. They're currently playing at the best they've ever played.
Yes.
They're turtling, dude. Like that's like the turd might look a little bit out of the butt, but like that's it. Like,
I don't disagree that Chengdu have a propensity to just think they have it figured out and then just spaghetti it everywhere. I have to say that it's changed.
Bro.
I think this is the meta that they have figured out or have found a good place within. I think the one thing you could leverage is the Zarya is a weird pick. I think it is kind of just a gigantic support call to allow your all-stars to play at the caliber that they have been.
No.
If they aren't there, Zarya falls apart. But
dude, it's not that they are like, oh, Zarya, that's like a masterpiece. Oh, strategic. It's like Legia can't play anything else at masters level. Like that's their one out that they have. Elsa is retired as hell. Like they're struggling to like. Once again, this is just like nobody else stepping up in APAC to hold the torch, and like I don't even believe they will play the Pharah as much as you guys are postulating they will, because famously this team cannot pick rational decisions in the situation when it matters, where they will run Sombra into the ground for no apparent reason, but have done so.
You are telling me versus the one team that does not have a hit scan, they are not going to run a Pharah?
Yeah.
Bro,
they will run it. They just won't run it to the extent
they
that
won't
you
run
guys
it as
believe.
much.
Yeah.
Agreed. I think especially later on in the series, I think we're gonna run into that, especially like the Chengdu stands where we're just like, run far. I don't care if it's bad. Just run it. Just run it. I think again, it always comes back. It always comes back to control. Control is where you can utilize
the Gladiator stands for like, no, don't run far. Don't run it. Don't run it.
They're completely the opposite. They're like, please do the dumb shit. Please, God.
Man.
No.
Like,
okay, I respect both takes. I don't know, man. I'm too deep in the Kool-Aid. I'm deep in the Kool-Aid while just like gasping for air. Like, Dallas, help me. Dallas, help me not pred for Chengdu.
I want to box
what I'm going through.
Dude, let me strategically box Yiska out. Okay, do you think they're gonna run the Simmei?
Yeah, more. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then they just get slammed. They can't. They can't.
I agree.
No, Joe. There's a caveat. If Late Young runs Zarya, they're gonna TP onto Late Young and just farm him.
Sure,
that will happen.
Yes, that does increase the surface area of the composition. They can just kind of. I think
he must play D.Va. If Late Young doesn't play D.Va, they are fucked.
I think you can go quicker. I think you can play a higher tempo for Chengdu and get there before they jump on you, because it is all predicated on the sim TP. If you don't give them the time to sim TP, you don't get an engage.
No, that's incorrect. Chengdu are the masters of like slow grinding these. They're not fast and fire. They are slow grinding a fire, looking for minor advantages until they squeeze you out. Fire in and of itself, to me, is a very slow burning comp. It's not a fast comp.
I agree, but I don't think that's how Chengdu wields it. I think they're the team that plays the fastest Pharah. Me personally, from what I've seen, I think they play the fastest Pharah, and I think you can leverage that on these specific
like 3
control
Pharahs
maps.
in total, but no.
I know it is a small sample size. I have to see that ground. But yeah, I think that Chengdu has the best chances. I think they're situated in the right meta or the right composition within the meta to beat the Dallas Fuel. I don't like what Dallas showed me versus Justice. I don't like the Genji look. I don't like the 6-man all in. I think Chengdu's there.
I will meet you in the middle where, okay, Yiska has zero faith in Chengdu. You have full faith in Chengdu. I will meet you both in the middle. And I have Chengdu losing to Fuel, but then beating the Rain. Okay? That's what I have.
Sure.
Bro.
I think the Rain might give them a harder time.
Yeah, well, they got Kai, first of all.
Exactly. I think Atlanta can have the adaptation. Dallas can't. Dallas are kind of stuck here. And I think they're stuck versus both Chengdu and Shanghai. They're not in a good spot.
Yiska, do you think Dallas are fucked versus Shanghai? Who do you have winning that?
Close. I think I have it 3-2, or 3-1 probably. For
Shanghai. So in winners
To
round
who?
2,
Shanghai.
To who?
Shanghai.
Shanghai, yeah.
And why do you think Dallas lose that?
I think
Is it just because you think Chengdu choke and Dallas and Shanghai just a way better team?
I think
that's an
the
acceptable
meta
answer,
read
it is.
right now is better than whatever the Fuel is running. Now I have a little bit of a curveball later on, but I think it's not enough time, especially considering the travel situation that Western teams have to go on to adapt to this at that time of that match. Now, I think I'm not even too surprised if that one doesn't feel too close, even though I have it close, which is not really that based on how these compositions are going to run into each other, but more so on the qualities that these teams have shown, right? But what I am interested in is like the bullshit that Joe has in the rest of the bracket. So you have Chengdu winning, and then
I have Chengdu beating Fuel.
Right.
I have Shanghai beating Atlanta in winners round 1.
Yeah.
Right. Shanghai play Chengdu. Shanghai beat them convincingly.
Okay.
That puts Shanghai in the final.
He's about to say Atlanta wins against Fuel, isn't he?
No. I have Dallas beating Atlanta.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with Atlanta beating Fuel?
No.
I think you can argue that Atlanta is a little bit more deep. You could argue that their brawl is a little better, even though they've kind of relied on some double shield looks that I'm not big on. I think Dallas is the more coordinated team more consistently. Over the course of the season, they've shown me more consistency in results. I probably should have given Atlanta maps, but I have Dallas Fuel eliminating the Atlanta Rain in losers round 1, 3-0. To schedule the Dallas Fuel Chengdu rematch where Chengdu beats them more convincingly. And then Chengdu goes to the finals and loses.
By the way, just like as a hilarious error, Eric just put in the San Francisco Shock, which is iconically the only appearance the San Francisco Shock will have in a playoff bracket this season.
Wow, you don't even have them at end of year? Damn, dude, that's rough.
I mean, not in the Final Four.
Sure.
So I have. This is gonna be brutal. I'm so sorry, Yiska. I have Chengdu beating Atlanta in the elimination game, and then I have Chengdu beating Fuel in the lower bracket.
Yeah.
Before then, Chengdu versus Shanghai for APAC 1-2 with Shanghai win.
My boy,
bro, the NA slender in this. Like, I'm expected to deliver good preds, and there's like two devils on my shoulders, like the one just preaching Chengdu.
He's so easily swayed, bro.
Dude, because
Dude.
I respect. Jesus Christ.
Who's swayed? Who, me or Yiska?
Yiska's easily swayed. We're both going like APAC, and he's like, man, I don't know what to do with all these NA stocks. Like, I got all these NA, all these coaches are telling me that,
all I'm saying is
Sim TP's the play.
Let me tell you one thing right here. If I'm the one pick I'm not confident in, I think, Joe, you're maybe on the same page.
Sure.
The one pred I'm not confident in is actually Chengdu at Rain. I think that could go. I think Rain could definitely win that one.
Yeah, there are ways out. And that's why
I will say that if Chengdu can beat Rain in that lower bracket game, they have the capability to beat Fuel, which is why I have them then beating Fuel. That's the real reason.
To be fair, Joe's bracket doesn't even have Atlanta playing the Rain. So
Atlanta plays
Atlanta
themselves
playing the Rain.
No, they play like because you said that Atlanta's going to lose against Shanghai, Fuel you lose against Chengdu, so then they go lower bracket against each other.
Yeah.
Atlanta loses, so they never meet the Hunters.
Correct. That Atlanta has a better chance beating Chengdu than Field does. That's what Joe said.
Right.
Yes, but in my bracket, I don't have them facing up, which is not strategic.
Then I'm also saying that that's why I'm not confident in my Chengdu versus Atlanta pick, because I agree that I think Atlanta do have a very, very a high likelihood of probably being the Hunters. But I don't know. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, so I printed in favor of Hunters.
I think something that is really highly undervalued, especially like in the take that Atlanta could beat Dallas, is like Dallas is not the same Dallas at the start of a stage as they are at the end of the stage.
Agreed.
So like I don't think, and Atlanta doesn't improve at the same pace in throughout the metas. If anything, they look worse in tournament situations than they do on NA soil, right? Like they lose steam in terms of building it up.
Because we've seen them one time? I don't know.
I guess, yeah. But yeah, I
Wait,
don't know.
Who loses steam?
Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
So
that's just because Shanghai happened.
I mean,
yeah, it's
who did they lose last time as well? They lost against Fuel last time, right?
In the joust.
They didn't lose against NYXL, so they must have lost against Dallas, yeah.
No, they lost. They beat NYXL. They lose to Dallas. They lose to Shanghai.
Yep.
Different meta though.
Yeah.
Much different meta.
Yeah. No,
I mean, that's an acceptable results. I think that's not out of question. Oh yeah, I see that.
No, yeah,
pretty normal.
Like once again, I'm not betting against the meta or reads that these teams have, but the qualities that they have expressed. And I don't know what should have been figured out about the Fuel that now doesn't count anymore. Like in my mind,
I agree.
But
I 100% agree with you. This is like they have to return. Specifically versus Atlanta, I think it opens up the Simmay stuff. Like it is a team that they've probably scrimmed against or played or had to have prepared for or had them in the back of their mind, right? I think you can run like what you were going to run in NA anyways. That's the only team I think you can acceptably do that into.
Yeah.
Everything else is going to be in essence, not exactly, but in essence, a lot of what they ran in June Joust and in the May Melee. It's going to be a 6-man all-in, just like they showed you versus the Justice.
Yeah.
The Justice, what did they do on Route 66? They locked in Tracer, they locked in Genji, the Moira, and the Lucio, if memory serves. And they just tried to run it down on him.
Yep.
Didn't work.
Yep.
Didn't work. Sombra's a little good at that.
Yeah.
That's my problem. Jalis has holes that can be, countered against. Like you cannot. I kind of almost see them running the Reaper again. Maybe for comfort. I don't know exactly what they're going to run, and they don't have a ton of time to figure it out either, which is dangerous.
Right. Yeah.
And that sucks. I'd love to see them have the time to figure it out to go into this match, but it's not the world we live in.
Also,
because I think they are better than that.
I think theoretically speaking, like the Pine card shouldn't be completely discarded. Like theoretically, there is still like
agreed. If the Pine card is played and it looks great, then I will take that L on the chin.
Yeah, like I'm not saying
I will gladly
it's
take
likely to happen. It's like probably a 5% chance. It's just not that surprising if it happens to me.
He's not even in Hawaii. Like what?
But he can play.
He can play from Korea.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, he just played from Korea.
That's what people said last time.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I agree.
The need wasn't as high, or like whatever, right? Like
yeah,
I don't think it's ridiculous. I don't think it's no.
It's not crazy to say that if Chengdu is going to lean on this Pharah as much as we think they will, maybe Pine comes out.
Picture in the first game, Chengdu versus Dallas. Dallas go down 0-2, and they've been farmed by Jimmu for 2 maps in a row.
Bro, if they, I hope that happens.
What you doing?
I hope that
right now. Your parents' home? What's going on?
That would be insane if they can reverse sweep the Chengdu Hunters by calling Pine up.
After getting farmed by 2 maps,
bro, like I don't even care if I'm right at that point. Like that's just drama, baby. Come on, you can't help but love that.
Well, I'll let you know that I felt I was right.
Hey, that's fine. That's fine. I don't care at that point.
All right.
So yeah, I don't know. Like I think I don't know. I feel like you're both sipping to the Chengdu juice a little bit too much. I think they are ascribing a consistency to the team that they have never shown. Like,
agreed, 100%.
And that's basically
people said that about Atlanta before they showed up. Come on, like every team has their moment.
But I think that's ignoring the meta that we're in. Yes, they could just spaghetti it all and decide not to run Pharah because they think Sombra's too good into like the Sim May stuff.
What is a
like based on what I saw versus Seoul, based on what information I got, I say that very loosely, but just like the minor bit of comms that I became aware of where they were talking about like, hey Jamu, you think Fire is good, go Fire. I think this is, as I said, this team definitely goes so much so that during the cast, I think the Seoul Chengdu one, I was like, they're gonna go Fire here as soon as they get X and Y situation. And they did exactly that. I feel like I know this team really well in terms of what they want to do. That's why I said Fire is a priority, not an option. So I don't see this team dropping Spaghetti. I think it's maybe a little bit presumptuous that they would just drop Spaghetti just because. I don't think they're that dumb. They can't be.
Yeah, I agree. They've done some bizarre decisions in the past, but I don't see them doing it here. I think it's a little too obvious.
And then the conclusion of what you said is that Chengdu and Shanghai meet in the final, and that's then
yes, and Shanghai give them the business.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't give. I'd love to hear an argument fielded to argue against Shanghai not being not only the best team in the world at the moment, but like the benefactors of their own era.
Shanghai do not beat Shanghai. That's all I'm saying. It's not gonna happen. Full carb all the way, baby. Yeah, I think the one Spaghetti drop area that I will say that may and probably will happen in Chengdu is that Late Young will be on the wrong hero. That is the most likely Spaghetti drop area. Jinmu Fire, forget about that. That to me is not even a question. He will play Fire. They will not drop that plate. The Late Young plate is the one I worry about.
Yep.
And if they mismanage that, they can and will lose.
Is overplaying Ameng an issue?
Oh fuck, there's that as well, isn't there?
I don't think so.
Hang on, Joe. You have to remember, Chengdu were very weird about when and where they were going to play Gaga instead of Ameng.
I know
in their matchup.
Yeah,
and I felt like that was super weird.
I think there are certain points where like ball is tough to run.
They both played ball.
I know, but you're running Gaga for the adaptability to be able to run anything like a Winston.
Just play Gaga the whole time.
Yeah, there's no reason.
I think that's probably not going to see. I think there's going to be a clear delineation. I think when you see Gaga, you want to cover all the options that the enemy team can throw at you. So if they have something like Seoul ran, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Seoul was running enough like mid long range hit scan that I think you could warrant a Winston. I think that's the reason why you see Gaga is because you want the breath just in case you want to throw that look at them. Whereas on control,
why play Among at all then? Gaga plays a ball anyway. Just play Gaga the whole time.
Yep.
I don't disagree with you, Joe, but that doesn't explain why they're playing Among.
It's fan service. That's what it is.
No, I can't.
I can't know.
I nearly lost to Philadelphia. You cannot be doing that for fan service. That's a ridiculous.
Bro, you guys have way too high standards for this organization. I swear to
God. No. That's the difference between getting into the knockout into Hawaii. I'm sorry, you don't risk fan service for that shit.
No,
you want fans? Win. That's the biggest fan service you can do is by winning.
Can we revisit the line that like the exchange between Jinmu and Leaf? Like Leaf tells him not like what do you think is the most likely to win? It is what puts on the biggest show. That's how they're
throwing
things.
Some Kofefe at me.
That's now we're taking it too far. So what? He's going to Rui, the head coach. Like, do you want to put on a show? Fuck yeah, let's put it out. I'm sorry, that's not happening behind the scenes.
I mean,
I wish they were
I don't
like that.
see there being a more reasonable argument than that for the Ameng Gaga case. I'm sorry.
You have one guy specifically practicing ball and only ball.
And he's still
you have
worse,
one guy.
and that's a crying shame, and you got to get him out of the league. Like,
I think you can argue, but I think the logic still stands that if you have a main tank playing a field of picks and one tank playing one pick, you probably want to trust that the guy playing the one pick probably fits in the map that you're only asking one pick to be played.
Just a bit of ball.
Yes.
I would tend to agree, but that's not how they have the team structured at the moment. So,
bro, are we giving out participation medals for the popular kid?
I don't disagree. The way that the team, the Chengdu Hunters, is structured is that they have Ameng play the ball maps where they only want to play ball, and everything else is Gaga's field.
Let's be honest about something. The team that in the entire history of the Overwatch League that has been the most guilty of fan service has been by far the Dallas Fuel. All the fucking streamers they pick up to put on their teams. Okay? Start there. Chengdu in the history of Overwatch League hasn't even done that, and you want to stretch that amongst fan servicing right now. That's the thing. When Dallas won't even play Pine for fan service.
True.
And they're the fan service fucking prime. The OG.
No, they could. You don't know. Maybe that, again, like you said, maybe they go down 0-2. Pine comes in like the Undertaker at WrestleMania 89 and just, pile drives the Chengdu Hunters off the top of the steel cage. Who knows? Could be. I'm ready for some fan service if that's the case. I'm cool with that. Do we think it's going to happen, though?
Are you guys sure, for instance, that Fearless doesn't show up with a ball? Sorry, I don't know. Just randomly, Discord is cutting off our audio. That's why I think it's fine now.
You're good. You're good.
I think he will. I think he can and will maybe perhaps try the ball, but they. Is that he's got his Fates ball based on Junjiao's? No. But could he have improved since then? I guess, but he hasn't. He haven't played ball this meta. They just haven't. So where has he been? Where has he been secretly practicing here? I got the stat here. Dallas will have 1% playing time on ball.
Yeah.
Compared to 40% Winston, 50%, 56% Ryan, 3% Orisa. 1% ball. So where the fuck is this ball practice if he's going to bring it out? It's not there.
I'll tell you, AVRL. I'll tell you where we've seen the ball. You know where we've seen the ball? In the preseason, where it belongs. In the garbage.
We saw it in the...
You know where we've seen the ball? We've seen it against Shanghai in the mirror matchup where they lost.
Yeah.
You don't have the time. If you were to say, we're gonna postpone this match and play it in a week, I'd be saying, okay, yes, Fearless might be able to, tidy up the ball in time, bring it in, show a good performance. You don't have time unless they've been hiding strats through thick and thin, through a game 5 against the Washington Justice to get here. I do not see them playing ball. No.
And I refuse to believe they've been scrimming it either, because if they were scrimming it, especially Dallas, and they're actually winning, then the NA coaches would have very different things to say about the meta.
Correct.
If Dallas was secretly winning with ball, they wouldn't be like, oh, APAC is so far behind.
If they whip it out and they perform with it, I will be wrong. I don't care. The likelihood that happens is not something I'm willing to bet on.
Because, I'm not too concerned, for instance, for Doha just instantly snapping on this Sombra, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
totally.
I'm confident.
Agreed.
I think he's a good Sombra. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. No.
You want to put Sparkle on Tracer? Fine.
Maybe his Tracer's improved. I don't know if it's got to be Flitter level yet.
No.
Flitter's Tracer phenomenal. This stage, I'm gonna be real.
He's pounding.
Yeah.
It's tough for Dallas. They're in a weird position. They don't have a hit scan to deal with any kind of aerial threat. They don't kind of have much else outside. Well, they do have a lot outside of that, but the problem is it doesn't match up well versus the Eastern style. It matches up great versus Atlanta, or at least it should.
I have, and this is the only caveat I make. I have, if Chengdu lose Atlanta, I have Dallas beating Atlanta, and then we have a Dallas-Shanghai final again.
Yeah.
That's what I have.
I agree with that.
But, yeah, okay. I have Dallas winning that.
You say what? You have Dallas
Dude.
winning.
Dude, here's the thing about these two teams.
Did you say Shanghai was going to win the final?
No,
Oh, you have Dallas winning the final. Okay.
because I think late tournament adaptation in that day are possible as sort of like shown by Shanghai.
Yeah.
And I think whoever has to make the move second is screwed in the final.
Whoever has to make them.
So
You mean the
last-
exact way that Shanghai beat Dallas last time?
Yes, because June Joust was Dallas has Shanghai's number. They get to the final. Shanghai has figured something out about their
I see
playstyle,
what you're saying.
and now
Okay, I
there's
see.
not enough time to adapt to that new
To
iteration.
the adaptation.
Yeah.
Right.
You just figure
I
out, okay, these guys, like, it was reasonably close. They're just going to try to play it better. Well, nope. Come out with a new and improved style. I think I trust the Dallas Fuel and I trust Rush to have something similar. The problem is, like, this is not at all impressive to foretell because I have no idea what it could be.
Yeah.
I have
But
some idea.
I'm interested. But continue.
yeah, no, like I think the way this matchup between them bounces around is favorable for them.
I don't disagree. I just don't know what that adaptation to the adaptation could look like.
You don't need to know
AVRL.
uncertainties. You can still be
I
accurate.
Agree. I
have
agree.
Kling.
Okay.
I think Sparkle forces the Doom and is good enough to make it work.
Mm.
And the only reason you're about to say, well, what about the Lip Sombra? And that is a hard counter, but I think Doha also goes Sombra. And
Yeah.
Doha and Lip go toe to toe, and then Sparkle just plays his game after Doha and Lip tie up in a 1v1.
I don't hate that. My issue.
I am really stretching hard and looking deep into Fuel and being like, okay,
Sure.
what could they possibly? Let's be real. The legs ain't it. Please, no
please
one
stop.
say Sparkle Soldier's gonna. No, I'm sorry.
No.
It's simply not. Not even this. Do not
Yeah.
say the way they beat Jimu's Fire is because Sparkle goes Soldier. I'm sorry, that's not gonna work.
That's
Yeah.
probably their best bet, but
No, their
it's
best
not going
bet
to
is
work.
Sparkle also goes Fire. I'm not joking. The best bet is Sparkle goes Fire or goes
I'm not mad
Echo.
at that. I'm not mad at
That's
that.
actually the way they beat Jimu. So I'm sorry, Chengdu, but I've actually exposed the counter.
Mirror them.
I'm not joking.
Discord is
Still
being
have to deal with the ball.
Yes. They have the balls. They don't have the ball.
All right, so we got everyone's spreads then. We're pretty locked in.
Dallas
Everyone
winning.
feels. I feel good and don't feel good. I feel strong about the Shanghai.
Yeah.
I don't feel good about my lower bracket. My lower bracket is not
It's a
comfortable.
gamble. It's dramatic.
I still want to give Rain a win versus Chengdu, and then maybe a Fuel versus Atlanta win, and then a Fuel versus Shanghai final. I still want to do that, but I don't know, man. I'm equally deep in the Chengdu source and also not completely convinced at the same time. I'm on the fence, actually.
I agree. If Chengdu drops early to the Fuel and have to play Rain, they could be eliminated at fourth. I do believe that, but I think that Dallas game is going to be a lot closer than people expect.
That's why I have 2-3. I have Chengdu going dropping 2-3 to Fuel.
Yeah, that's why I have it 3-2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't feel good about my final. I feel pretty good about anything else. I think it would have probably been more reasonable of me to just say, like, Shanghai beats Fuel first time around, probably do it second time around as well. And yeah, that's just how it goes.
I will also
don't
say,
give any
despite
credit.
me saying Doha goes Sombra and tries to match, and Doha in Sparkle goes Doom and stuff, Lip Sombra has been so far beyond. I think he's leveled up beyond Doha.
Yeah.
People used to be like, "Oh, Doha's the best." I'm sorry, but at the moment, I'm not convinced.
The
I'm
question,
convinced by looking at Lip.
here's the
He's
question.
way too far ahead.
Here's the question. What's more important for a Sombra? Hitting 5 to 6 man EMPs or hitting headshots and doing tons of damage while hitting 0 EMPs? Like,
He's improved.
0 MPs. Unironically, getting 0 MPs. I'm not joking either. I'm
Yeah.
full serious when I say that. I reviewed Lip today,
mhm.
and the way that he's playing EMPs is very particular. He doesn't care about getting big EMPs.
No.
They're playing for tempo. He is specifically targeting solo and duo EMPs
Yeah.
on 1 or 2 players.
Yeah.
Very deliberately.
Yeah.
This isn't like whoopsies. I pressed Q and it missed.
No, yeah.
Oopsie daisies.
No, of
I
course.
did a baddie. No, he's doing this on purpose. He knows what the fuck he's doing.
Yeah.
This is planned.
It's a weird shift away from a lot of teams because a lot of teams do go for the big like wide EMPs, targeting a lot of people, using that as a team fight winner, to maximize the silence. But they're not necessarily going.
They
Exactly.
want the that's it.
They're using it in a different way, so it looks worse, but it's not worse.
Because they're still winning the team fight. Everyone's like, oh, they failed the EMP and they still won the team
no,
fight. What it
it's
means?
not-
It's like, no, they won the team fight because they went for a
Yes.
small EMP.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's especially down to the ball synergy, right? Like if I feel like I saw you reviewing it, and I felt like very often it was just about around like the combination between Fate and Lib, just like finding a window where someone is out of position, you just EMP him, and now like the damage of these two is enough to take someone down.
Mm-hmm.
Overwatch first picks is just too strong, and that's why they win big fights. I don't hate it. I think there's a pretty, like, it feels like there's not that high of a success rate at that particular strategy. I think they not necessarily don't need the EMPs always. I think the hack would sometimes suffice. It feels a little bit like wasted value sometimes, but yeah.
Well, I mean, you have to look at the mechanics of hack like that. Yeah, go ahead.
Manual hack gets very easily cancelled.
Sure.
Yes.
EMP is
not
almost
as easily
uncounterable
when
if you're
your
good.
ball is on his balls. You know, like
I saw specifically Lip go for solo EMP on Flora's Tracer just to confirm that kill and get a 6v5.
Sure.
You will
It's a big
never
pick, too.
manually, you will not manually hack that
Sure,
Tracer.
of course.
It's not going to happen.
That's fair,
You
yeah,
will EMP it.
Yeah. It's more like when they're in backlines, like, I don't know, against BAP or some shit. Like,
Even then, like I trust these players to react to like a hack and then just throwing lamp and then surviving, or even Zen's. Like the fact that
Plays are
Zen
really-
Brig, it's tough to survive that. You have to kind of react instantaneously. If you try to like hack into Zen isn't as good as EMP, obviously.
Sure.
But yeah, I just that small window, it really makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's weird
Alright.
because Shanghai is probably the only team to do this, but yeah, it's a weird decision make that they use EMP the way that they do. Very
Also,
stylistic.
the area that I strongly believe that Chengdu cannot and will not match. They don't have a second powerful DPS after leave. And okay, yeah, Jim on the fire is great, but that's not going to be good enough when Lip's the fucking best hit scan in the world right now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but if there's one player that'll shut Jimmu down that will actually shoot him, it's going to be Lip,
Yeah.
and that's going to hurt.
Yep.
Lip easily diffs both Leave and Jimmu on the Sombra, and I think Ball's competitive. I think either Fate or Gaga or Among, they could all be pretty
Totally.
good. Late Young's going to get diffed by Void, there's no question there. And then the support line, like I think Nisha, Voltor, Mercy is great, but as far as Lucio Brigand goes, that all goes to Lee J Gon. And then, Izuaki's been solid and compromising this entire season. I think Izuaki's one of their best players as well. So I don't know that Monk and 1987 are going to be able to get there. So player quality wise, it just fully goes over the way of Shanghai. But I'm pretty happy with my finals. I think Shanghai win no matter what. We're going to start closing out now. So any final thoughts from you guys on any of those things?
Not particularly. I think that this is going to be this is going to sound dumb, but I think because this is so stylistically opposed that it's either going exactly the way that AVRL and I think, or it is just like we have
We could
not
be so wrong.
figured it out. We are exactly right, or we are so wrong it's not funny.
Yeah.
Like it is comical how wrong we are. Like there is no in between.
Yeah.
Like it
Well,
is
yes,
that
yes.
foiled.
It could also be in the same boat. I'm not gonna
To
lie.
be fair.
He could be so violent.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I-
Agreed.
We're all in the same boat.
All I'm saying is like prepare for the meme where the left side is like Mistress Avril going like, honey, it's time to pred Chengdu again based on like thinking they're entirely consistent the entire time, and the right side is also Avril just going, yes, honey. That's you guys basically have like
Why are you talking on me? Joe's friends Chengdu way harder. I'm like still on the fence on some things. Joe's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's definitely
Chengdu,
you're
baby,
targeting-
let's go.
Why are you targeting me?
The thing is, like, yeah, to be fair, like,
He's scarred.
you know how long I've been like around this kid just doing Chengdu Bob stuff. Like, it's sort of to be like, that's just how Joe eventually operates. Like, he tries to get away with it with some bullshit like, oh, objectivity. No. Eventually, he will continue to being the China stan, and unfortunately, it came out this stage because they gave him an ounce of hope, and he took them for all they're worth.
I'm super objective, by the way. I'm mega objective, and if I truly believe that NA had it, I would back them 100%.
Agreed. Same here.
That's my approach. But
I'm all for a Chengdu pick, but if you show me something that's just gonna wallop them, then I'll pred you. I haven't seen that from the West. I see a lot of good from Chengdu specifically.
Yeah.
Also, last two things, because I know people say like, oh, they didn't talk about this. Damon, Shanghai coach, cool. He was there for Summer Showdown. I'm sure he's doing great stuff. As with always, in terms of coaching, no one knows what the fuck the coaches do anyway. So who really knows what that's about and what's going on there? No one knows. That's the truth. And then Kaylee on two-way, probably expected. They've stopped playing Kaylee for a long time now. I expect it'll be Toy and Eileen to close out the season, and I don't think Charge pick up another player.
Nope.
Once again, the great mystery: who actually coaches Hangzhou or Guangzhou? Like,
I don't know.
So weird to see so many departures and not enough, guys coming in.
Just have a player-led team, right?
Oh yeah.
Rio's now the coach,
Rio's the
and
coach.
it's now Kareem. I don't know. It's a player-led team now. Hey, it worked for Atlanta for a short while,
Yeah.
Did it, or did they change when Antur came in?
No, I'm talking about old
Just
Atlanta
for,
from like
right.
2, maybe.
Yeah.
Like way back. And this is from when Dustin Bauman, Dogman was telling his stories about when they swapped to player coaching because they weren't confident in their coaching calls. And so they did what they wanted to, and it started working, and then they went back to coach instead of started failing again. He said that verbatim. Well, I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, he told that story publicly.
Yeah.
But anyway, guys, I'm looking forward. It's going to be a good weekend of games.
Yeah.
Be running my co-stream again. I'm looking forward to the matches. I'll be waking up for them. It might be an awful time for Yiska. I think it'll be a reasonable time for Joe, but he's a bit of a gremlin, so who knows? It is a very exciting weekend because this is going to be tight. I was not super excited about June Joust just because I hated the meta we were going in, but I genuinely love this meta right now. So no matter who wins, it'll be great games, and I'll thoroughly enjoy how things go. And then we'll have lots of fun next week for episode 184 when we get to break down and do a bit of a post-mortem and have a laugh at how wrong people were. And I'm sure 1, 2, 3, maybe who
Maybe
knows
all
how
of us
are going to be extremely wrong and comically off. But there's all that to look forward to and more next week, same time. Thanks for joining us for episode 183. Catch you next week.